Chapter 497. Inside the mirror dimension parallel to London, the second battlefield between Iron Man and Proxima Archangel. Although the intensity of the battle here was not as intense as Kale's, it still covered the city within 100 meters. The buildings, streets, and roads were all scorched black after being ravaged by cannonballs. There were flames everywhere, and thick pungent black smoke curled up and floated up. Pa! A steel man with golden-red paint scratches on the surface fell from the sky and fell directly into the ruins formed by the collapse of the house. A burst of sand and dust was raised on the spot, and finally, it rolled a few more times before coming to a stop. The mask on the front of the steel man's head was mostly damaged, revealing half of Tawny's mature and determined face. He lay on the rubble and broken tiles, gasping for breath. His limbs, protected by steel armor, were damaged by the spear, and they were in a scrapped state, constantly surrounded by white electric light. Ta-ta! A vigorous dark purple silhouette jumped down and landed in front of Tony. It was Proxima Dark Knight who was fighting against Tony. Proxima Archangel was holding a black spear, its original alien uniform was scorched black and messy, and there was blood at the corner of its mouth. Obviously, this battle was not easy for it, but it still stood to the end. Wiping the blood from the corner of its mouth, Proxima Archangel stepped forward, the tip of its spear flashing with purple light. It looked down coldly at Tawny lying on the ground and said coldly, "Can't do it anymore? No matter if it is a biological or technological product, as long as it is attacked by my spear, its internal nervous system will be damaged and scrapped. Now that the steel armor on your limbs is all scrapped, how are you going to fight me?" Tawny did not respond to Proxima Archangel, nor did he take off his steel armor. Instead, he gasped for breath, trying to buy even a second. "Oh? Are you still waiting for the battle over there to end? Don't be delusional, General Deathblade can be ranked in the top 3 among us. Countless Star Masters have died under its Deathblade, and that human man is no exception." Proxima Archangel sneered, raised the spear in its hand, and was about to give Tawny the final blow. But suddenly, Proxima Dark Knight shuddered as he looked sideways in a certain direction. His face was filled with disbelief and a bit of panic. "How is it? Has the outcome of the battle been decided?" Tawny felt relieved. He looked at Proxima Centauri with a serious face and smiled. "Let me guess. It should be my godfather who won, right?" "Shut up. Shut up, you earthling." Dark Proxima Centauri's hand that was holding the spear was still trembling as he shouted in a nervous manner. The General Deathblade's aura had disappeared. His connection with it had also been completely severed in an instant. However, that human man's aura still existed, and it was so strong that it was difficult to describe it with words. All of this information pointed to one thing: the General Deathblade, who had fought for many years under the command of Master Thanos, had died, defeated by the native humans of a barren planet. How is this possible? How is this possible? Proxima Centauri muttered to himself, unable to accept the fact in front of him. Tawny continued, "You may not know, but among us, Godfather is the absolute number 1. He has not tasted defeat for decades." "Shut up. I told you to shut up." Proxima Centauri's face became more and more ferocious. He was so angry that he almost lost his mind. He looked down at Tawny again and raised the spear in his hand above his head. "Even if you win, you will die here." As soon as Proxima Centauri finished speaking, he didn't hesitate at all. He slammed the spear in his hand down and inserted it into the shining chest of Tawny's Iron Man armor, which was the Krypton energy core that provided the entire armor. "This is the moment, Jarvis," Tawny suddenly shouted. "Understood, sir." With J.R.V.I.'s words, the Iron Man armor suddenly disintegrated and separated from Tony's body to both sides. Tawny's hasty tactical roll just avoided the fatal blow of Proxima Centauri's spear. "Want to run?" The spear was inserted into the ground, and Proxima Centauri's pupils shrank, and he was about to pursue Tani. But at this moment, the scattered parts of the Iron Man armor accelerated toward him and automatically put on Proxima Centauri's body. Proxima Centauri was shocked, but he couldn't get rid of the armor parts. In just half a second, his body was wrapped in the broken Iron Man armor. Proxima Centauri looked at Tani next to him and found that Tani had climbed up from the ground and smiled strangely at him. Tani didn't give him a chance to react and quickly issued instructions. Jarvis, self-destruct the Mark 8 AK model. What do you want to do? Let me go. The energy core in his chest flashed with a dazzling light, and Proxima Centauri had an ominous premonition in his heart, and he couldn't help but scream loudly. Let me teach you a lesson. Until the last second, you don't know who will win or lose. Tani waved at Proxima Centauri and fell back. The next moment, in the desperate scream of Proxima Centauri, the Iron Man armor he was wearing activated the self-destruct mode. With a boom, the armor and the person turned into a fireball together, the parts and minced meat burst to the side, and the aftermath of the impact pushed Tani, who was a few meters away, 10 meters away. Cough. Tony struggled to get up from the ground. When he confirmed that only the spear was left on the scorched earth in front of him, he let out a long sigh of relief. He followed the exhaustion of his body and laid down on the ground, revealing an expression of relief. In the second battle, Iron Man Tani won by a narrow margin. On the other side. In the central square of London in the real world, the phenomenon of celestial bodies converging in the sky has come to an end. With a burst of blurred light and shadow, Earth, London, and the dark world are connected again. A gust of cold wind blew past. Next to the fountain in the empty square, Mock's figure gradually emerged. It knelt on the ground, its body twitching and trembling. The red ether energy continued to escape and dissipate from the surface of its body, and its powerful momentum and vitality continued to plummet. How can it be, my power? Mock's eyes were dull, and it reached out to grab the escaping ether energy, but the red mist was still flowing through its fingers. Another gust of wind blew past. In the square area in front of Mock's, a red cloak appeared, and then it was Thor's hammer, silver armor, rough and wild blonde hair. Thor appeared in the square with a cold face, holding Thor's hammer and walking toward Mock's. Thor looked at the red energy dissipating from Mock's body, and said in a deep voice, "My father once said, never rely too much on external objects and the power of a third party. Only when one's heart is strong can one be truly strong. If you rely on the power you received, you can't even defeat me, let alone Kale. Besides, the ether particles are not on you. It's just the remaining energy given to you by others, and it'll be gone after you use it up." Thor came to Mox and raised Thor's hammer. Lightning wrapped around his arm and the hammer, and the wind blew his blonde hair, making him look wilder and more domineering. Mox stayed where he was, stunned. He had already given up resisting, lost in the power of the commander level and unable to extricate himself. Go repent in hell. Chapter 498. In the sky above London. The 8 overlapping reflections of the world began to vanish one after another. Dark clouds surged, and the phenomenon of celestial bodies converging finally came to an end. With a terrifying flash of lightning and thunder, raindrops the size of beans fell, washing away the smoke and scars of the war in London. Thor held the blood-stained Thor's hammer tightly, standing in the square in the pouring rain. He looked down at Mock's corpse on the ground, his chest still heaving up and down as he panted heavily. "Mother, I have avenged you, but so what if he killed his enemy? The dead would never come back." Thor's face was full of sorrow. He looked up at the sky. The rain drenched him from head to toe, and he could no longer tell if it was water or tears on his face. After standing in a daze for a long time, Thor suddenly heard a familiar shout from behind him. "Thor, Thor!" Saul looked back. It was his girlfriend, Jane. She ran towards him in the heavy rain, and with one last leap, she threw herself into his broad, strong chest. Thor hugged her back. Deep in love, the two of them hugged and kissed. After the passion, Thor looked down at Jane and asked curiously, "Jane? Why are you here?" She simply explained how she was abducted by his brother, Loki, and after an hour on a certain planet, Loki sent her back to London on Earth. Loki, Thor frowned, thinking of the ether particles, and asked, "He didn't do anything to you?" "No." Jane shook her head gently. Thinking of Loki's excited and happy expression when he sent her back, she could not help but ponder. "I am not an important person to him. In the end, he seemed to have achieved some goal, so he did not force me to stay and sent me back here directly." Achieved some goal? That bastard, what is he planning again? Although Thor said so, he could never hate Loki. Instead, he maintained the attitude of a brother who expected better from him. Thor thought about it and said to Jane, "Jane, stay on Earth. With Kale here, you'll be safe. I'll make a trip back to the deity realm and report the situation to Royal Father." Jane nodded in agreement and sighed in her heart. The two of them should be the most distant long-distance relationship. After a beam of light from the Bifrost Bridge descended from the sky, Thor turned into the corpse of Mox and disappeared from the central square of London. Meanwhile, inside the mirror space. Go back and work hard on your cultivation. The distance between you and them is not in the same dimension. The Ancient One drew a circle with his right hand and made a seal. He opened the portal to the outside world and left the mirror dimension first. Strange nodded with deep understanding. He looked back at the alien battleship that had crashed into the city, and the mirror world of London that had been ravaged into ruins. If this wasn't the mirror dimension, the damage wouldn't be any better than New York City. Can I really catch up with their figures? Strange muttered to himself and didn't think too much. He followed the Ancient One and disappeared into the portal. In the mirror dimension of London, Tony was lying on the charred ground, gasping for air. With a rustling sound, a tall and straight figure appeared in front of him and stretched out his hand. "Godfather." Tony opened his eyes with difficulty. When he saw the person who came, he couldn't help but smile and reached out to hold Kale's hand. Kale pulled Tony up from the ground and patted him on the shoulder. He smiled faintly and said, "You did well this time. I was the one who was almost killed." Tony smiled bitterly and looked at the spear that was inserted into the ground. He said with lingering fear, "Are all Thanos' subordinates so strong? Thanos will be stronger." Kale's face was calm as he said meaningfully, "Don't let your guard down. Work hard to equip yourself. This long-lasting war has just begun." Although Kale and Thanos had not met yet, they both had infinite primordial stones or information about them. One of their ultimate goals was to collect 6 infinite primordial stones. The previous battle between New York and Galaxy Kree on Earth was just a small spark of friction. Last time, 2 people from Kale's camp were kidnapped by Thanos' subordinates. This time, Kale and Tawny killed 2 generals from Thanos' camp. It was a temporary tie. The competition between Kale and Thanos for the gemstones would get bigger and bigger. In the end, it would be a full-scale war that would not stop until one of them was dead. I can already smell the gunpowder and have made some preventive preparations." Tawny nodded and was about to say something when a melodious ringtone suddenly sounded in his trouser pocket. Tawny instinctively took out his phone. When he saw Little Pepper's name on the screen, he looked at Kale in surprise. "Isn't this mirror world an independent and sealed world? How can a call come in?" Kale smiled faintly and said, "Someone opened a portal to the outside world and temporarily connected the 2 worlds." Tawny did not have time to ask who it was. Under the urging of the ringtone, he picked up the call. Little Pepper's anxious voice immediately came from the phone. "Tawny, where have you been? Why can't I get through? Are you okay?" "Of course I'm fine. The matter is settled. Godfather is beside me too. What could happen?" Tawny endured the pain and pretended to be relaxed. Little Pepper continued, "That's good. I'll tell you. Tawny listened and nodded. After hanging up the phone, he took a deep breath and said to Kale, "Godfather. Little Pepper asked me to go back with you for dinner tonight." Before Kale could respond, Tawny quickly added, "This is an invitation from my father. He said that he has something to tell you." "Oh? Howard?" Kale raised his eyebrows in surprise. Thinking about it, he had not seen Howard since returning to Earth from the Milky Way Alliance. He simply agreed. "Okay, since the matter has come to an end, I can't be bothered to interfere too much with Thor's family matters. Let the people from Family Cal and SHELD handle the aftermath in London. Let's have a celebratory feast and have a good drink when we get back." Tawny quickly said, "No problem." The rest of the matter was simple. Kale contacted Heimdall and asked him to search for the missing vice in the underworld. On the other hand, he contacted Yutong and asked her to send Family Cal members to the mirror image world to clean up the battle. As for the City of London in the real world, Tawny contacted Fry and asked him to send us HELD agents to clean up the aftermath. That afternoon, various news channels were still crazily reporting on the sensational news of the symbol of peace Kale, Iron Man Tawny, and Thor, as well as Thor, appearing in the City of London and engaging in a fierce battle with alien invaders. The world was in an uproar because of this and it was upgraded to a hot topic. That night, Kale and Tawny had changed into tuxedo suits. They brought Lucy and Little Pepper, respectively, to Howard's lakeside villa in the suburbs of New York for dinner. Chapter 499. The lakeside villa on the outskirts of New York. This was a retirement home that Tawny had bought for Howard according to his request. Next to the two-story wooden villa were beautiful forests and lakes, and there were few people around. When Kale arrived here in Tawny's car, he couldn't believe it. Howard was a science freak, and even on a wild planet in the Milky Way Alliance, he had built a high-tech defense building with his bare hands. Yet, he was living in such a simple house on Earth. When Kale entered the villa, he was even more surprised when he saw Howard sitting on an old chair in the hall, reading a book with his reading glasses. Howard had aged a lot compared to 4 months ago. His hair was all white, and his face was dry and wrinkled. It was full of the marks of the vicissitudes of life. Lucy covered her mouth in disbelief and blurted out, "Howard, why didn't you use the infinite formula to slow down your aging?" "You, Lucy." Kale waved his hand in time and interrupted Lucy's words. He took a few steps forward and looked down at Howard sitting on the chair. Although Howard was as old as an 80-year-old man, he was still clear-headed. He raised his head and looked at Kale. He took off his reading glasses and put down the book in his hand. He said softly, "Master, you're here." Kale laughed and scolded, "Howard. You're always having problems, aren't you? Your brain isn't working anymore. You didn't use the infinite formula, and you didn't ask me for natural lifespan." Howard smiled. He naturally knew that the Master was omnipotent. Even if he wanted eternal life, the Master could do it. But he didn't need that kind of thing. "Master." Howard smiled and said, "I used to think that scientific research was everything to me. So, I was always afraid that I would die one day, afraid that I would no longer be able to research and see the crystallization of wisdom in the future. But it wasn't until I joined Family Cal and had Tawny that I gradually understood the importance of family." Howard paused for a moment before continuing, "During my days of wandering in space, I've seen the beauty of science. Now that my family is back, I have no regrets in life. Tawny has also surpassed his father and inherited Stark Industries. I can finally rest and retire at ease." At the door, Tawny and Boz were standing hand in hand, leaning against each other as they looked at Howard happily. "I understand. If this is what you want, then I have nothing more to say." Kale nodded. He respected Howard's decision. It could be seen that Howard was really tired. From the Second World War to the galactic battlefield, he had been silently contributing behind the scenes. Now that he had quietly disappeared from the world, there was nothing wrong with that. It was just that there were fewer and fewer acquaintances in the same generation, which made Cale feel a little disappointed. If one day, even Captain America Steve, Thor, and Sorcerer Supreme Alpha Centauri were no longer in this world, then perhaps the world would really be silent. Howard raised his turbid eyes and coughed softly. "Tawny, Boz, go to the second floor first and prepare dinner. I have something to talk to Master Cale alone." "Okay." Tawny nodded immediately. "Lucy, let's go to the second floor together." Boz leaned over to hold Lucy's arm and smiled. "Okay." Lucy obediently followed Boz and went to the second floor with Tawny, leaving the hall to Howard and Cale. Cale did not stand on ceremony. He went to the sofa opposite the chair and sat down with his legs crossed. "Between you and me, just say whatever you want to say." "Okay." Howard nodded and went straight to the point. "Have you heard of Hank Pym?" "Pym?" Cale's eyes flashed. He did not expect to hear this name from Howard. Howard recalled the past and stated, Hank was a very outstanding scientist. His wisdom was not below mine. When you left Earth at the end of the Second World War, Hank Pym joined SHELD as a soldier and scientist. He worked with me for a period of time. He invented an item. Even now, I'm still shocked by it. I've spent half my life researching it, but it's still hard to surpass it. "What's that?" Cale pretended not to understand and asked. "The Pym particle." Howard took a deep breath and said, "It's an important technology that allows it to expand and shrink at will." Hank also mastered the method to control ants and used Pym's technology to create Ant-Man battle suits. He and his wife once transformed into SHELD Special Agent Ant-Men to protect the world during the transition between the old era and the new era. Cale said calmly, "And then?" "As far as I know, there's no such thing as Ant-Men in SHELD now." "Yes. I only found out after I returned to Earth and asked someone to investigate." Howard slowly turned around and took out a file from behind his back. He took out a file and placed it on the table. The front was a bespectacled old man with white hair on his temples. "After I left Earth, during a special operation in 1975, Hank Pym was judged to be dead because his wife had shrunk in order to prevent a nuclear explosion. Hank had a falling out with SHELD because of this, and he hid the Pym technology that he invented. That's why no one knows about it." Cale picked up Hank Pym's personal file and flipped through the pages. The content was similar to what he had asked Yutong to investigate. Howard continued, "Later, Hank opened a company called Pym Technology, but he didn't publicly excavate the core technology of the Pym particle. Instead, he invested in technology and engineering. He has been retired for several years now, and the Pym particle has disappeared from the world for decades." Cale put down the file and looked at Howard. "Then you're bringing this up now because you want me to?" Howard looked slightly excited and said, "Family head. The Pym particle is a top-notch technological product no less than infinite energy, Iron Man armor, and artificial intelligence. If we can reasonably use the Pym particle technology, we can definitely raise the level of our current technological civilization." Cale nodded in agreement and narrowed his eyes. "I understand what you mean. If possible, it's best to pull Hank Pym into the family cow. Otherwise, at least master the Pym particle technology." Howard nodded solemnly. He also felt a little guilty towards Hank Pym. No matter what, he wanted to make up for it a little. In fact, previously, Cale had already done a series of investigations and plans on the ant people and Pym technology. It was just that he first focused on the strange doctor and the small spiders. Then, he happened to encounter the Dark Elves' attack in the Divine Dominion, so he didn't have time to make a move. But now, since Howard specially mentioned it, and the matter in the Divine Dominion had just been resolved, he could try to make contact with the ant people. Leave this matter to me. Kale smiled faintly. He already had an idea in his mind. Chapter 500. 3 days later, at noon. A stylish white vintage car drove into New York City from the suburbs against the warm sun and breeze. After entering one of the main roads, it headed straight to the bustling city area filled with commercial buildings. After passing through the security checkpoint, the vintage car braked to a stop. As the window rolled down, a stern-looking old man sat in the driver's seat. He was wearing a gentleman's suit and a pair of sunglasses. He handed several documents to the security officer in an orderly manner. The security officer looked down at the documents and immediately handed them over. Hank Pym. Welcome back to New York, Mr. Pym. I'm not dead yet, that's all. Hank Pym mocked himself, took back the documents, and continued to drive to the address. Just yesterday morning, the chairman of Pym Technology, who managed Hank Pym on behalf of Pym Technology, suddenly called him and said that the company had something important to announce. Even his daughter, who was the manager, asked him to come back to the company. Hank Pym, who had retired for many years, did not think too much about it. He cancelled his original vacation plan and went to Pym Technology, which he built with his own hands. Pym Technology's main business was technology and engineering. It was more high-end and not as famous as Stark Industries. However, it was still one of the rare technology companies in New York. When Hank Pym arrived at the main building of Pym Technology, there were already many invited businessmen. When Hank Pym was about to enter the lobby, the extra security officer at the door quickly stopped him. "Sir, please show your ID card or our company's invitation. Take a look at that first." Hank Pym pointed at the founder's photo on the first floor and took off his glasses, revealing a face that was almost identical to the one in the photo. "Sorry sir, please come in, please come in." The security officer was shocked to see the real founder of the company for the first time. He quickly stepped aside and bowed with a welcoming gesture. Hank Pym did not mind. He walked into the lobby and soon saw his daughter, Hope Van Dyne. Hope was 30 years old and unmarried. She was definitely a strong career woman. Since Hank retired, she had been staying at Pym Technology as his successor as the general manager. Hank Pym couldn't help but think of his late wife when he saw Hopper in a mature suit with shoulder-length hair and light makeup walking towards him with a smile. It had been almost 30 years since the disappearance of the first generation of ant people. The current chairman and doctor of Pym Technology, Darren Cross, led a group of businessmen out of the reception hall on the second floor. When Cross saw Hank Pym in the lobby, he immediately clapped his hands excitedly and said, "Everyone, please take a look. That is the founder of Pym Technology Company, and also my life mentor, Hank Pym. Please give him a round of applause." Hank Pym had seen countless grand occasions. He stood in the middle of the lobby and gladly accepted the attention and applause from the people in the industry. Cross went downstairs and shook hands with Hank Pym. After exchanging a few warm greetings, he said impatiently, "Since Mr. Pym is here, let's go to the demonstration hall on the third floor and reveal the purpose and meaning of gathering everyone here today." Cross led the group to the third floor of Pym Technology's headquarters. It was the demonstration hall for the release of technological products. The demonstration hall was very spacious, enough to accommodate 30 people without feeling crowded. A large screen was built into the wall, and the building structure was made of glass and metal. It looked very high-end, and a strong technological aura came from it. Cross was a professional in his early 40s. Under the attention of many celebrities, he did not have stage fright. He walked to the center of the demonstration stage with his shiny bald head. "After I took over Pym Technology Company, I've been working on developing a type of particle. By increasing the density and strength, I can change the distance between atoms." As soon as Cross's opening speech came out, it immediately attracted many people. However, it also made Hank Pym frown. He had an extremely bad premonition in his heart. This revolutionary idea that crosses the century actually appeared in the hands of my mentor 30 years ago. But why is it buried in Hank's cobweb-covered manuscripts? I have no way of knowing. Cross said, but you can think about it. If a soldier's body could shrink to the size of an insect, what would happen? At this point, Cross ignored Hank Pym's pale face and activated the controller in his hand in front of the crowd of businessmen. The big screen in the room suddenly lit up and played an ancient historical record. In the black and white picture, the Hydra soldiers were attacked by unknown creatures and fell to the ground inexplicably. As the picture continued to enlarge, a humanoid figure the size of an insect appeared. An ant-like person? Many people who saw the video exclaimed. Cross's face was even more fanatical as he said, "That's right, an Ant-Man. He will become an ultimate combat agent. With a size that is difficult to detect with the naked eye, he can easily complete infiltration missions that others can't." I'm right, my mentor, Hank. Cross smiled as he looked at the Ant-Man, Hank Pym, in the crowd. That's just a legend. Hank Pym's face was still calm. Is that so? Let's just treat it as a legend for now. But it's precisely because of the Ant-Man that gave me inspiration. I was wondering why I didn't use those particles and telescopic steel to create a special item. Cross moved his body aside. As he spoke, a pillar rose from the demonstration platform. Inside the glass tank carried by the pillar was a wasp-style combat suit the size of a thumb. That's... Hank Pym's eyes widened, and he could no longer pretend to be calm. This is the Wasp combat suit. It allows people to stretch and shrink at will, becoming the size of a wasp and becoming the most deadly ultimate combat weapon. It will be the ultimate weapon that will end the war of this era. Cross laughed loudly and played the concept video of the Wasp combat suit in detail. It was the content of countless unstoppable Wasp men marching to war all over the world. Whoever wants to invest can place an order with me first. Cross ended the product announcement with his last ambitious sentence. It also caused many businessmen to discuss heatedly. Some people even bid on the spot, making Cross smile like a profiteer. After coming out of the demonstration hall, Hank Pym's expression was a little ugly. He called Cross to the side and said in a deep voice, "Darren, there's a reason why I hid the Pym particles. That thing isn't perfect enough. It shouldn't appear in the world. Hank, you could have cooperated with me, but it's too late now. You destroyed the Pym particles with your own hands. Now, I'm going to bring it to greater heights." Cross clearly didn't listen to his advice. After saying a few words, he went to discuss the order with the businessmen. Hank Pym was silent. At this moment, Hope approached him and whispered, "Father, Darren still trusts me a lot. Darren still trusts me. Give me the Ant-Man battle suit, and I'll take care of this." "No, you're not suitable." Hank Pym didn't hesitate and shook his head. He said in a low voice, "I have a candidate. Perhaps I can give it a try." After Hank Pym and the group of businessmen left the headquarters of Pym Technology, Cross returned to the demonstration hall. Cross returned to the demonstration hall alone. He faced an empty corner and said respectfully, "Mr. Kyle, everything you instructed has been completed." His voice echoed in the space of the demonstration hall. As the scene in the room rippled, the Wasp combat suit and the various big screens on the demonstration stage disappeared. The room was empty, and only a few hovering drones were operating in midair. The cameras had turned off the surreal holographic images that had just been projected. No one knew that it was all a large-scale illusion created by technology. Cross, who was originally a bald man, returned to being a bearded young man wearing a glass helmet and holding a drone remote control. In the originally empty corner of the room, Kale was sitting on a chair with his legs crossed. He looked up at the bearded young man. "Well done, Quentin Baker. Although you were introduced by Howard, your ability to pass off as genuine really came in handy." Quentin said excitedly, "Thank you, Mr. Kale, for giving me a stage to showcase my talents. I hope to continue working for you. Kale nodded. That will depend on your performance. You have to give Hank Pym enough pressure. Otherwise, the Ant-Man won't appear so easily. Yes. Quentin accepted the order. Chapter 501. Above the 9 realms, the Divine Palace. In the huge golden Divine Palace, Thor held Thor's hammer, a red cloak draped over his shoulders as he walked into the hall majestically. There was not a single person in the hall. It was very different from the bustling and glorious atmosphere of the past. Only the king of the Divine Realm, Odin, still sat on the throne exclusive to the king of the Divine Realm. You're finally back, Thor. Odin lowered his eyes and looked at Thor, who walked into the hall. Father. Thor put down Thor's hammer and knelt on one knee. He reported respectfully, the crisis caused by the celestial convergence has been successfully resolved. The Dark Elf army that invaded my divine realm last time, their leader, Mox, was also killed by me. Odin narrowed his eyes and remained silent as if he was thinking about something. As for the ether particles in Jane's body, I've confirmed that they are no longer in her body. I suspect that Loki used the Tesseract to take the ether particles away. When Thor mentioned Loki, his eyes darkened. Ever since Loki betrayed the divine realm, he had a feeling that he was drifting further and further away from him. Odin nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "All right, I understand. Get up. You've worked hard this time." Thor shook his head and did not stand up from the ground. Instead, he said seriously, "Yesterday, because of Jane and Mother, I encouraged Kale to break out of the divine realm with me. I will bear the consequences of this matter alone. I am willing to accept any punishment." "I see. Since you want to be punished so much, I'll fulfill your wish." Odin's face was solemn. He thought for a moment and said slowly, "Then I'll punish you to go to the borders of the various realms and fix the chaos caused by the celestial convergence." "Father." Thor's expression changed. This was far from a punishment. It was a responsibility that he should bear. "Go." Odin looked at him with a rare kind smile. "All right, I won't let you down." Thor's face was filled with determination. He picked up the Thor hammer and bowed to Odin, who was sitting on the throne. Swinging his red cloak, he walked out of the hall. Behind him, Odin's voice continued, "Thor, I will always be proud of you." "Royal father." Thor took a deep breath. Without looking back, he strode out of the hall. After Thor left the Immortal Palace, the hall of the Immortal Palace returned to silence. Odin, who was sitting on the throne, revealed a strange smile. "I will always be proud of you." "Old man, this sentence is really useful. I've been deceived for so many years." Odin smiled evilly. As his body twisted and changed, his white hair turned into glossy and elegant black hair. His clothes returned to their original black robes. His old and weathered face turned back into a young, handsome and gloomy appearance. It was the evil god Loki. Loki held the scepter in one hand and rested the other on the armrest. He sat on the throne and looked down at the huge and magnificent golden hall. Outside the Immortal Palace, the buildings of the people of the Divine Realm, the Rainbow Bridge, and the starry sunset were all in sight. The corners of Loki's mouth curled up slightly. This feeling is not bad. This was the goal that Loki wanted to achieve. After Loki used magic to disguise himself and swindle the ether particles from the future Captain America. He sent a fake message to Thanos, the false information that the ether particles were on Thor's group. This caused a dispute between Thanos' generals and the heroes of the Avengers camp. At the same time, Loki sneaked back to the Immortal Palace where there was no defense. He used the ether particles to increase the power of the ether particles and banished the weakened Odin down to the mortal world. He took the opportunity to disguise himself as Odin and sat on the throne. Everything was going according to his script. Only something went wrong in the middle. He was almost killed by Kale through the twin star energy beam from his fingertips. Old man Odin, you didn't expect this, did you? What you took from me, I will take it all back with my own hands. Loki smiled coldly and put the scepter beside the throne. He opened his palms. The blue tesseract appeared in one hand and the red ether particles appeared in the other. 2 primordial stones in hand. The ambition in Loki's heart continued to grow. Now that I have 2 infinite primordial stones, I have a great advantage over Thanos and Kale. When they are competing with each other, as long as I take advantage of the situation and gather 6 infinite primordial stones first, the entire 9 realms will submit to me. Right. Loki seemed to have thought of something. He first put away the ether particles, activated the tesseract, and summoned a cloud of space fog from the hull. The space fog and the portal of the earth mages had the same effect. The only difference was that the former was an exclusive skill of the dimensional primordial stones and was almost instantaneous. The latter needed to consume magic power and draw circles to cast the spell. Loki took a step toward the space fog. He did not need to go through the Rainbow Bridge. He directly crossed the universe and came to a residential room in New York on Earth. The interior of this room. The glass helmet was placed on the computer table. Quentin was sitting in front of the computer chair and working on a model. He was shocked when he heard the voice behind him. Quentin subconsciously turned his head. When he saw Loki, the surprise on his face immediately became natural. He put his hand on his chest and bowed slightly. You are here, my master. Raise your eyes and look at me. Loki knocked the floor with the scepter. Quentin obediently raised his head. The black light hidden in his eyes flashed. Not bad. The corner of Loki's mouth rose. No one except Loki knew that during the last battle in New York, he had not only used mind control on Hawkeye, a group of SHELD agents and scientists. It also accidentally allowed Loki to discover Quentin, a talent with extraordinary potential, in the Stark Industries building. It could be said that Quentin was a seed of darkness that Loki had buried on Earth. It was not until today, half a year later, that he was finally able to play a role. Loki smiled. Listen to me. As long as you get close to the Stark family, you will have a chance to come into contact with that man. Quentin hurriedly nodded and said, Indeed. Now, I have gained the initial trust of the symbol of peace, Stark Industries. In the near future, I will no longer be the mediocre scientist of the past, but the superhero, Mystique. No matter who you are only my subordinate. Don't forget this. Loki's face was cold. He gave Quentin a little warning and then asked curiously, what have Kale and the others been doing recently? Pym particles, Ant-Man. Quentin blurted out. Under Loki's puzzled expression, he explained the Ant-Man in detail. Miniaturized creatures that can change their size. Earth actually has such top-notch technology. Loki muttered to himself and sat down on a chair. Soon, a smile appeared on his face. He ordered from the bottom of his heart, Quentin. Continue to do as Kale asked, but not only give him pressure and a sense of crisis, you have to take the opportunity to kill the Ant-Man and bring me the Pym particles. Kill the Ant-Man? Quentin hesitated and said, Master, I'm only using the illusion projected by the drone to deceive people. In fact, I don't have many lethal means of attack. You didn't before, but what if you have this? Loki smiled evilly and stretched out his left palm. A red mist-like energy object appeared, spinning. This is... Quentin widened his eyes in shock and uncertainty. He felt an unprecedented power and might from it. Open your body and mind and accept it. Loki gave a part of his ether energy to Quentin. He really wanted to know what kind of brilliant fire would erupt when the projection illusion created by technology combined with the profound energy of the Stone of Reality. Chapter 502. On the pendulum dome of the New York Cathedral. How boring. Peter, wearing a brand new spider suit with a blue and red background, was sitting on a 50-meter-high pendulum, swinging his legs idly, looking down at the peaceful New York City below and sighing. Although the summer vacation was coming to an end and high school was about to begin, Tawny also asked him to focus on his studies first. But after receiving the custom-made spider suit from Tawny, Peter couldn't help but put it on and wanted to go outside to see if there were any crimes that could be stopped. If only there was a chance for Spider-Man to make his debut. Debut as a newbie hero, amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, let Tawny and Mr. Kale take a good look, lest they always think of him as a child. Peter was fantasizing about his heroic dream when a crow flew over his head and almost pooped on the new spider suit. But in fact, since the alien war half a year ago, the ordinary guards and SHELD personnel have been strengthened, plus the symbol of peace, Iron Man, Captain America, and other superheroes are resident in New York. Crime is really not something that can be easily encountered. When the sun set and night fell, the city lit up with dazzling neon lights. Peter was alone in the cold wind at high altitude, took off the spider hood and rubbed his hair irritably. No, really no. Forget it, let's go back. If I go back later, I'll be scolded by Aunt May again. Just as Peter the Spider was about to stand up from the pendulum, a powerful explosion suddenly rang out from the neighboring street. Peter quickly looked over there and saw that on the 5th floor of a 5-star hotel, a red energy was breaking through the glass window. Inside the 5th floor, there was already a faint fire and it was about to spread. The incident really came. Peter opened his mouth in a daze and quickly put on the spider hood without thinking too much. With a wave of his right hand, the silk equipment on the wrist of the suit immediately ejected tough white spider silk to stick to the opposite building. Swinging high in the city, Peter rushed to the fire site at full speed. At this time, in a certain room on the 5th floor of a 5-star hotel, Quentin stood in the middle of the room, his whole body surrounded by ether energy. The overflowing violent energy destroyed all the furniture in the room, and the energy swept out uncontrollably. How wonderful, this feeling of being filled with power. Quentin was extremely excited. Use this power wisely and complete the mission I've given you. I'll give you even more power. Next to him, Loki smiled evilly. He opened the spatial fog and disappeared from the room along with the fog. As long as I have this power, I can become a superhero in the limelight, surpassing the symbol of peace and Iron Man. Quentin clenched his fists tightly, and the ether energy finally completely fused into his body. After a series of transformations, it actually materialized into a set of golden armor with a helmet. After the fire, the corridor on the 5th floor of the hotel was filled with thick smoke. Many guests fled downstairs in panic. Wow! A golden-haired girl fell to the ground in the corridor, crying and shouting, "Mom!" However, due to the thick smoke and the chaotic scene, no one noticed her. Just as the girl was about to be stepped on by the guests behind her, crack! The glass window shattered from the outside, and a bright red and blue figure rushed into the 5th floor of the hotel from the outside. He slid swiftly along the corridor, cleverly avoiding the chaotic crowd while holding the golden-haired girl on the ground in his arms. The golden-haired girl stopped crying and raised her red and swollen eyes to see a friendly face with a spider mask. "Hey! My name is Spider-Man, I'm your friendly neighbor. Don't cry, I'll get you out of here, okay?" Peter finished speaking in a very fast tone. After the golden-haired girl nodded, he immediately rushed out of the window and jumped down. Midway, he connected the spider silk to slow down and landed in front of the 5-star hotel like a swing. After safely putting the golden-haired girl on the ground, Peter waved his hand. "Stay here and don't move. Wait for your family to find you. I'll go take care of the trouble upstairs first." As soon as he finished speaking, he launched the spider silk again and swung it toward the 5th floor of the hotel, where black smoke and flames were billowing out. The whole process of saving someone for the first time was smooth and natural. Even Peter was a little impressed by himself. However, just as he swung in the air, a figure suddenly rushed out of the window on the 5th floor and flew over his shoulder. That is? Peter hung upside down on the outer wall of the hotel like a spider. He looked up at the sky and only saw a mysterious man wearing a glass helmet and armor. His tail left behind a red smoke trail as he flew at high speed and was about to disappear at the end of the night sky. He can actually fly. Red smoke. Peter suddenly remembered that the red energy that caused the fire just now was similar to the red smoke left behind by the mysterious man. The other party was very likely to be the perpetrator of this incident. If I don't chase after him, he'll run away. Peter was about to launch the spider silk and chase after the mysterious man, but inside the hotel, the guests' cries for help came again. Peter hesitated for a while, but still gave up chasing and returned to the hotel to save people first. 5 minutes later. When Peter rescued the last person with a burnt smell, police cars and fire trucks arrived late with sirens blaring. Most of the 5th floor of the hotel was enveloped in flames. While no one was paying attention, Peter launched the spider silk and swung it high to the rooftop of the high-rise building next to him. Taking off the spider helmet, Peter's hair was wet and sweaty from the previous fire. Fortunately, the spider suit had a strong sweat-absorbing function. Who was that person just now? Peter looked down at the fire scene where the situation was under control, and then looked in the direction where the mysterious man disappeared. Should I report to Mr. Kale or Mr. Stark? Peter quickly dismissed the idea. It was just a fire. If he had to report such a small matter to the two, he would really be treated like a child. I hope I can meet him again next time and let Spider-Man arrest him. Peter made up his mind, but before he could act cool for 3 seconds, his face suddenly changed. By the way, it's now 7:00 in the evening. I have to go to the high school tomorrow to report as a freshman. Thinking of this, Peter was like a child who had done something wrong. He hurriedly launched the spider silk and swung it in the direction of home. Peter did not even notice that on the rooftop of the building next to him, there was a figure hidden in the darkness. After seeing Peter leave, the figure shook his head gently. What a child. On the other side. Hank Pym's villa in New York City. Hank Pym and his daughter, Hope, were sitting in front of a computer chair, looking at the screen and secretly filming a young man in a video. To be more precise, it was a thief who had just been released from prison. Hope raised her eyebrows coldly and questioned, Hank, the suitable candidate you mentioned is him? A former professional thief? Hope, will it kill you to call me daddy? Hank Pym glanced at her, then looked at the video again and said with certainty, believe me, I won't be wrong. He is the best candidate for the second generation of Ant-Man. Chapter 503. In the office on the top floor of the unnatural firm building. Yu Tong, dressed in a black suit and skirt, walked down the corridor in her high heels with a stack of documents in her hands. Yu Tong frowned slightly when she reached the office door. She pushed the door open from half a meter away, and the door was opened by an irresistible force. The floor-to-ceiling windows in the office were wide open. The curtains fluttered in the wind, and golden sunlight filled the room. Kale was sitting on Yu Tong's personal office chair with his legs crossed. He was resting with his eyes closed. When Yu Tong opened the door, he couldn't help but beckon her with his finger. Boss, why didn't you tell me you were coming back? Yu Tong shook her head helplessly. There was an unconcealable smile on her fair and beautiful face. She walked into the room with cat-like steps and closed the office door with a wave of her hand. Yu Tong came to the office chair and put down the documents in her hands. She smoothed out the creases on the back of her skirt from top to bottom. She used Kale as a human chair and sat on his lap. Her slender legs were pressed together and placed elegantly at an angle. Yu Tong's body was very light. There was an indescribable softness to it, and there was a faint fragrance. Kale coughed and said, "Ahem, it wouldn't be good if others came in and saw this." "Don't worry. I've already reported this to my mother." Yutong smiled gently. "That won't do. It wouldn't be good if other family Cal members came in to report on work and saw this." Although Kale said that, his hands still followed his instincts and gently supported Yutong's amazingly elastic waist. "Okay, I got it." As Yutong spoke, she covered the entire building with her consciousness under Kale's puzzled gaze. "Everyone, listen up. I'm taking a break today, so no one is allowed to take half a step into the office on the top floor. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." Yutong's commanding voice was transmitted to every family Cal member's mind, causing the family Cal members who were at work to tremble violently. They instinctively replied, "Yes, ma'am." Many people who came to consult were confused. "You're really something." Kale smiled bitterly. "This should be enough, right? No matter what you want to do, it doesn't matter. No one will disturb you." Yutong stretched her back a little, her body showing a breathtaking curve, which made Kale feel a little hot. Yutong's words came into his ears again. "You won't do anything anyway, boss. Don't be so absolute." Kale snorted softly. He used Yutong as a pillow and hugged her in his arms. However, he lowered his head and thought about something. Yutong keenly sensed this and said gently, "Boss, ever since you went to God's domain last time, you've been absent-minded. You seem to be thinking about something. It's troublesome." Kale fiddled with the pendant on Yutong's neck that had a mind gem embedded in it. He could not help but sigh and say, "The ether particles and the reality gem that were originally in my hands were actually obtained by Loki. Moreover, Lorna is still in the hands of the enemy. We don't know the exact situation yet. In addition, there might be a war in the future that even I can't handle. Even if I want to relax, I can't relax anymore." Yutong held his hand and said sincerely, "Boss, I'll share your burden. No matter what the future is, as long as you're here, I'm not afraid." "I know. Of course, I know." Kale sniffed Yutong's black hair and said, "We still have to plan for a rainy day. The current battle strength of Earth's lineup is far from enough. We need to dig up as many talents as possible and cultivate heroes who can take charge of things on their own. That's why you went to get in touch with the strange doctor, Empress Little Peter, and Hank Pym." Yutong smiled and said. Even though she had not been by Kale's side all the time, she viewed Kale's matters as more important than her own life. Therefore, she basically knew about them at the first possible moment. Kale was also happy to share his worries with Yutong. Not only was Yutong his lover and trusted him 100%, but Yutong also had enough ability to shoulder the burden of the problems he was currently facing. Of course, Lucy, who had awakened her ice attribute physique, also had the qualifications. Yutong pondered and said, "You've personally come into contact with the others, but you didn't do it with Hank Pym. Instead, you handed it to someone else. Is this reliable?" Kale smiled calmly and said, "There's nothing reliable or not. I'm just giving them a push or giving them a sense of pressure so that they can speed up and start on the trajectory of their lives that they should be traveling on. As for whether they can reach the end, that's not something I care about. A hero who could not rely on his own strength to become a hero could not be considered a hero. At best, he was just an outstanding warrior." Yutong rolled her eyes at him and said, "Even so, you still sent out the poison agent. That's just in case, to correct some mistakes." Kale shrugged and the corner of his mouth curled up. "Don't some people like to play within a game? Then let's compete and see who has more power behind the scenes. Let's see who has more powerful chess pieces and trump cards in their hands." At this moment, before the Great War began, the two of them began to talk. Kale, Thanos, and the leaders of the lineup like Loki would not appear in person. Instead, they would play chess in the dark. With the 9 worlds as the chessboard, the people in the lineup would be the chess pieces. They would first compete in a small hidden war. Now was not the time to determine the winner. Instead, they were each preparing everything, collecting the trump cards that could win this war, and waiting for the final war to start. New York, Midtown High School. Peter, with his shiny and straight hair and dark circles under his eyes, came to the school with his school bag and his admission notice. That's right. After being reprimanded by Aunt May last night, Peter sneaked out in his spider battle suit again. He wanted to find the strange culprit that caused the fire, but he couldn't find any clues after wandering around the nearby city. Only then did he obediently go back to sleep. It's this class. Peter stopped in the corridor of the teaching building and looked up at the class number. After thinking for a while, he turned from the mysterious man back to the real school. I hope there are good-looking girls in this class. Peter had reached puberty and his hormones were bursting. When he stood at the door of the classroom and was about to look inside, a big hand just happened to rest on his thin shoulder from behind. Teacher? Peter felt the strength of the big hand and his body shook violently. What teacher? You are also in this class, aren't you? Since we are so fated, we can sit at the same table. A low and childish voice came. Peter braced himself and turned around, only to see a black teenager, who was as fat as a bucket, looking at him excitedly. It's over, my youth. Peter rolled his eyes. Our youth has just begun. My name is Ned. What about you? Ned put his hand on his shoulder as if they were familiar with each other. Peter Parker. Peter and Ned walked into the classroom together. There were many people in the classroom. Men and women were sitting in twos and threes. Then I'll call you Peter. Ned's enthusiasm made Peter a little uncomfortable, but anyway, his high school career had officially begun. Chapter 504. Midtown High School, in a grade 1 classroom with televisions, radios, and foldable blackboards. No matter how reluctant Peter was, Ned, who thought they had reached a consensus, still became his deskmate as a friend. The other students were still reporting and choosing their seats. Taking advantage of this time, Ned started a topic with Peter. Peter, which hero do you like the most in the Avengers? Hero? Peter replied without hesitation. Iron Man, oh. Ned became even more excited, his saliva flying everywhere. I like Iron Man too. His Iron Man suit is so cool. Of course, he's also very rich. But he's only second in my heart. My favorite is still the symbol of peace. He's the real #1 hero. Peter didn't refute this. Indeed, men, women, old, and young in New York City would tacitly leave the #1 hero to the symbol of peace when talking about this topic. This was already a consensus among everyone. When it came to the symbol of peace, no one would compare him to other heroes. After all, the symbol of peace was the first superhero. He ended the long-lasting World War II war, founded the Avengers, and saved the world several times. No other heroes could compare to him in terms of fame and achievements. The symbol of peace's existence was more like a kind of faith, which had long surpassed the framework of heroes. The corners of Peter's lips curled up. If Fatty Ned in front of him knew that he had once fought with the symbol of peace, would he be so shocked that his jaw would fall off? Sitting here and waiting for someone? A male student near the podium in the classroom argued. He took the remote control from the podium and turned on the TV next to the blackboard. The channel that had just been turned on was broadcasting news and current affairs. The thick smoke of the fire immediately attracted the attention of all the students in the classroom. At 6:50 last night, a fire suddenly broke out in Remy's 5-star hotel on the central street of Queens. The fire was so severe that it basically covered the entire 5th floor. Fortunately, there were no casualties. This is all thanks to a mysterious person in a tight red and blue suit. As the female reporter explained, she played a video. In the video, one could vaguely see Spider-Man swinging spider silk and rescuing the victims from the 5th floor to the ground. Ned looked at the news and said in surprise, "Wow, is that a new hero? That guy seems to be able to fly." "No, he shouldn't be able to fly." Peter rubbed his nose. The feeling of watching himself on TV was not bad. Ned continued to comment, "His clothes are more like Iron Man's design style. Could it be that he's imitating the Iron Man suit?" Well, Peter didn't know what to say. After all, the spider combat suit was made by Tawny. It could be said that Ned had inadvertently touched on the truth. Since it's a new hero, shouldn't it have a name? Let me think, how about calling him the Fire Monkey? It's a cool name, isn't it? Ned looked at Peter with great interest, wanting to hear his opinion. Peter corrected him a little excitedly. His name is Spider-Man, not Fire Monkey. Nate was dumbfounded. He was obviously shocked. The other students also looked at Peter with puzzled eyes. Childish. A short-haired female student sitting in the corner quietly reading a book raised her head and glanced at Peter. "Well, I also heard it from someone else." Peter spread his hands awkwardly and buried his head in his school bag. The news finally made a stage summary. The cause of the fire has not been determined yet. The police have ruled out an accident. This incident is likely to be caused by someone. Please continue to pay attention to the New York News Channel for the details. Someone? Peter raised his head and recalled the mysterious figure wearing a glass helmet and a cloak, riding a red mist and flashing by last night. Who was that person? At the same time, in a restaurant in New York. A middle-aged man in his 30s with a face full of stubble and vicissitudes of life could no longer be called a young man. He was wearing a waiter suit and squatting in front of the restaurant in a daze, depressed. His name was Scott Lang. He had been in prison for theft for only a few months. Although he had managed to find a low-level job, after the divorce, it was difficult for him to get back the custody of his eldest daughter. Scott now needed a sum of money, a considerable sum of money. He estimated that he would not be able to earn that much even if he worked as a waiter for half his life. Perhaps they knew about Scott's current situation. His old friends appeared in front of him in 2s and 3s and gave him a cake-like suggestion. When Scott heard the suggestion of his old friends, he did not think too much and immediately rejected it. "Steal again? Please, I've already washed my hands of it. I can't go back to prison." "Shoo, buddy, lower your voice." One of the fat men with a beard put his hand on Scott's shoulder and said in a low voice, "We really need you this time. I can guarantee that this will be your last order. As long as you take it, the money you get will not only be enough for you to live the rest of your life, but your daughter will also be back by your side." Scott was silent. He had to admit that he was tempted. He could do anything for his daughter. "Tell me, who is the target?" Scott said in a deep voice. "I knew you wouldn't refuse." The fat man with a beard clenched his fist excitedly and said simply, "The target is a businessman and scientist. He has many properties in New York. He has a villa that has been vacant for a long time. According to my understanding, there is a super safe room there. By the way, the businessman's name is Hank Pym." Late that night, a van with curtains was parked on the road in the villa area. "I'm going." Scott, who was wearing a night suit, got out of the van from the back door after putting on his headset and mask. The other accomplices who stayed in the van operated all kinds of equipment to block the nearby surveillance and signals. They also monitored every movement in the nearby streets. Their level of professionalism was no less than that of an international bandit. After Scott left the van, he approached the target villa. He came to the wall, skillfully and nimbly climbed into the courtyard. After opening the anti-theft window with a tool, he sneaked into the villa like a cat. "Go down the hall. There is a staircase on the right. Go up to the second floor. The target is the third storage room, Following his companion's instructions, Scott turned on the flashlight and came to the storage room on the second floor. When he saw the fingerprint security door, he could not help but smile. This was child's play. Naturally, it was not a problem for him. He taped the old fingerprints left on the handlebars and duplicated the lines. He then used the duplicated fingerprints to pass through the scanning checkpoint. 5 minutes later, Scott did not trigger any alarms and successfully entered the storage room. He saw the 2-meter-long and 1-meter-wide reinforced steel door. "No wonder you guys are looking for me. This is a troublesome guy," Scott exclaimed. "What's wrong?" his companion asked in surprise. "It's Carbondale. It was made in 1910 using the steel from the Titanic." Scott smiled out of habit. "Do you remember the iceberg? It's not very cold." Scott was a former chief engineer. When he was a thief, he was also a top-notch thief. He knew how to pry open the safe at first glance. He drilled a small hole in the main structure of the door. After pouring in a large amount of water, he used liquid nitrogen to accelerate the freezing process. The inside and outside of the door were quickly frozen into ice. Bang! Not long after, the entire door exploded. The door fell to the floor with a loud crash. Hearing the sound of the door breaking, his companion could not hide his excitement. "Quick, take a look. What's inside?" Scott was also very excited. He took a big stride, crossed the collapsed steel door, and entered the room. However, it was empty inside. There was only a table. On top of it was a dark red motorcycle suit covered in dust and a strange helmet. "What the hell is this?" Scott's mouth was wide open. He was completely speechless. Chapter 505. In the van parked on the side of the road, the atmosphere in the car was very depressing. The three accomplices stared straight at Scott, their faces ugly as if they had eaten a mouthful of feces instead of a cake. "So, after a night of hard work, all we get is this old motorcycle glove?" The corners of the fat man's mouth twitched slightly as he looked at the strange clothes in Scott's hand that were stolen from behind the villa's double security door. Another companion added, "To be more precise, it's a weird-looking motorcycle glove. I wouldn't want this second-hand outfit even if it was sold online for $5. What else can we do? Let's retreat first. We've screwed up this time." The fat man sighed heavily and drove the van away from the villa area quickly. Scott looked down at the uniform in his hand. As a former engineer, his intuition told him that this was definitely not a simple motorcycle glove. Why would a motorcycle glove be placed behind Carbondale's security door? Moreover, it was covered with dust. It was obvious that someone had treasured it for many years and had not mistakenly placed it inside. The most important thing was the material used for the suit and the helmet style that went with it. He had never seen anything like it. Scott was filled with doubts as he followed the accomplices back home. No matter what, they had stolen it. They couldn't just put it back, right? The criminal team did not notice that there were dozens of ants on the walls of the target's villa. They were acting as surveillance cameras in different corners, monitoring everything that had happened inside and outside the villa. On the other side, in the basement of a villa, Hank Pym and Hope were still awake. They sat in front of the screen and quietly watched Scott and the others leave in the van. "How was it?" Hank Pym looked at his daughter with a smile. Hope's pretty face was cold. She crossed her arms and snorted. "He's really a thief. I'm referring to his skills, courage, and wisdom." Hank Pym narrowed his eyes. As an Ant-Man, he naturally knew what kind of special talent was needed to become an Ant-Man. Hope did not say anything, as if agreeing. She pondered and said, "Now that the battle suit is in his hands, what's next? Let's go back to sleep." At least let him try it once. Hank Pym was like an old fox. His eyes under the lens carried a meaningful look. The next morning, The glaring sunlight shone through the window onto the bedside. Scott woke up with sleepy eyes. He put on his slippers and went to the bathroom to rinse his mouth and wash his face. He happened to see the dark red uniform that was thrown next to the basin last night. Originally, Scott wanted to wash it in the washing machine first, but after thinking about it, he decided to try it on. He took off his clothes and put the strange uniform on from his feet to his neck. Before putting on the helmet, Scott suddenly took out a test tube filled with liquid from his clothes. It was labeled, "Pim particle," in English. Pim particles? Was it placed here? Scott found an inner slot that could fit the reagent at the waist of the uniform. He did not think too much about it. After stuffing the Pim particle test tube into the inner slot, he put on the matching helmet. Scott put on the strange uniform and stood in front of the basin. He looked at himself in the mirror and muttered to himself, "The style of this uniform is a bit like an ant." Yes, an ant. The main purpose is, Scott saw a red button on the glove of the uniform. He tried pressing it at the same time, and then, at the same time. On the roof of the house where Scott was, a cloud of red mist descended from the sky. A mysterious man in a cloak of armor appeared from it. Quentin looked down at the house below coldly. He stretched out his hands and a green whirlwind appeared. As it spun, it became a tornado with a radius of 2 meters in the blink of an eye. It also showed facial features and hands, resembling a physical monster. A wind elemental monster. "Go, go." Quentin pointed down the house. The wind elemental monster immediately obeyed and flew down. At the same time, in Scott's house. "Scott, Scott, are you there?" The chubby man had just bought breakfast from outside. He wanted to ask Scott to eat together, but when he opened the door, he realized that Scott was already up. However, no matter how hard he looked in the house, he could not find Scott. "That's strange. That guy is so early. Where did he go?" The chubby man looked at the empty bathroom and returned to the living room in surprise. He did not see that there was a tiny ant-like creature waving at him from the basin. "Scott, since you're not here, I'll finish my breakfast first." The chubby man said one last sentence. He sat on the dining chair and just took out a piece of bread and butter. The door and windows on the first floor were suddenly slammed open by a strong wind. Bang! Along with countless broken stones and glass, the strong wind ravaged everything in the room. The gigantic physical monster formed by the green wind forced its way into the house. It reached out its huge hand and grabbed the chubby man in its hand. Don't kill me." Faced with the sudden change, the chubby man almost wet his pants. What met his eyes was the blurry and terrifying huge face of the wind elemental monster. "Hand over that set of clothes." The wind elemental monster growled at the chubby man. The strong wind that it exhaled blew his hair and cheeks askew. "What clothes?" The chubby man was stunned and did not react for a moment. "The set of clothes you got." The wind elemental monster continued to yell. The strong wind mixed with sand made the chubby man feel pain. The chubby man hurriedly said, Yes, we got a set of clothes, but it's not with me. It's with Scott." "But Scott is not at home now. Hand it over, or die." The wind elemental monster continued to threaten. Part of its body ravaged and destroyed the furniture and walls in the house. "It's really not with me." The chubby man cried miserably. His neck was being squeezed so hard that he almost could not breathe. On the roof of the house. Quentin frowned. The intelligent flying devices scan did not find the man called Scott, nor did it find the existence of the Ant-Man battle suit. How was this possible? A person who had never left the house had disappeared for no reason? Before Quentin could think too much, a black dot suddenly appeared in front of him. He looked up sharply and saw the black dot approaching and enlarging. Soon, it turned into a big tree, a tree. Quentin hurriedly flew up to dodge. The pine tree that was uprooted crashed onto the roof where he was originally standing and flattened the head of the house. Quentin's pupils contracted slightly. He flew in the air and looked hundreds of meters away, but he could not see a single person. Who is it? He had actually thrown a tree over from such a far distance. Is this a warning? Quentin lowered his head and thought for a moment. He smiled coldly and chose to retreat with the red mist. After Quentin left, the wind elemental monster in the house turned from solid to incorporeal. It quickly dissipated like a gust of wind. The chubby man immediately collapsed to the ground. He touched his neck with lingering fear. "Fatty, are you okay?" The bathroom door suddenly opened. Scott, who was still wearing the Ant-Man battle suit, rushed out of the bathroom with a helmet in his hand. He ran toward the chubby man on the ground. "Where did you go just now?" The chubby man looked at Scott with a pale face. "I don't know." Scott shook his head and took a deep breath. "I only know that we have to return this suit as soon as possible. Otherwise, something big will happen." Chapter 506. When night fell. Scott took the mysterious Ant-Man uniform and really went to the original target villa, intending to put the damn thing back behind the safety door. This set of clothes was too strange. It could shrink a person, causing him to almost drown in the water of the basin. It also attracted an unknown wind monster. "It's here." Scott looked at the villa in front of him that had no lights on. He sneakily climbed over the wall. The moment his feet touched the ground, the lights in the villa's courtyard were turned on. More than a dozen spotlights shone on him. "Oh no!" Scott's face changed dramatically. He turned around and wanted to escape, but lights were also on behind him, and then figures came out of the darkness. More than a dozen police officers, who had been lying in ambush in the yard, raised their loaded guns and surrounded Scott. "Police! You're under arrest." Scott didn't know what to say. He smiled bitterly and said, I just came to return something. Do you think we, the People's Police, will believe your nonsense? Handcuff him and take him away." The police captain waved his hand and asked several police officers to handcuff Scott, put him in the police car, and return to the local police station. A few flying ants flying at low altitude looked out and reported the scene in detail to the basement of a villa somewhere. "I should go." Hank Pym put on a neat suit, adjusted his tie slightly, and waved goodbye to Hope in the house. He opened the door of the basement and walked out. "Is he more suitable to be an Ant-Man than me?" Hope looked at the screen conveyed by the camera and shook his head, unable to accept the fact that Scott was being taken away by a group of police officers. In the detention room of the Wharton Street Police Branch in New York. Scott sat on the single bed and covered his face with his hands. He had just left prison not long ago, and he didn't expect to step into it again. This made him depressed and regretful. He reflected on himself for about 5 minutes. The police came to inform Scott in the detention room that the owner of the villa had summoned him. This made Scott uneasy. He was afraid that the owner of the villa would insist on suing him and make him spend the rest of his life in prison. It could be said that, ever since Scott stepped into Hank Pym's villa, he had completely fallen into the trap and could no longer break free from the control of others. On the interrogation table. Scott and Hank sat on opposite sides of the table and looked at each other for the first time. "I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't have stolen your clothes." Scott was just about to say something to get the other party's forgiveness when Hank said calmly, "Maggie is right. No wonder she didn't want to hand Kathy over to you. Once you hit rock bottom, you'll walk the path of theft." "How do you know about Maggie and Kathy?" Scott was stunned. My G was his ex-wife, and Kathy was his biological daughter whom he wanted to adopt. Isn't it obvious? This means that I've investigated you thoroughly. Hank was like a confident businessman. He said straightforwardly, "All right, let's not waste each other's time. I'll give you two choices. 1. To spend the rest of my life in prison. 2. When you return to the detention room, listen to my instructions. Who the hell are you? Scott stared straight at Hank. No matter how slow he was, he knew that he had been plotted against. However, now that the other party had something on him, he had no right to talk to the other party. My name is Hank Pym. I'm a scientist. Hank smiled faintly and didn't say much. He left his seat on the interrogation table and walked straight out of the police station. Even if I agree, how can I listen to instructions in the detention room? Scott, who had returned to the detention room, was puzzled. However, after a while, he completely understood the meaning of Hank's words. A group of small ants appeared out of nowhere and crawled into Scott's detention room. They even worked together to carry a small uniform. After the ants put the uniform on the ground, with a whoosh, the uniform became more than 100 times bigger and returned to its original size that could be used by humans. That's the uniform. Scott widened his eyes and looked at the Ant-Man uniform that resembled a motorcyclist on the ground. A flying ant flew up from the ground and stopped not far away from him. It even spoke in Hank's voice, "Put it on and listen to my instructions." Camera, microphone? Scott looked at the flying ants in bewilderment. Surprisingly, the flying ants were carrying tiny cameras and microphones. Scott gritted his teeth and put on the Ant-Man uniform on the ground, risking the risk of being discovered by the patrolling police. On the rooftop of the police station building. Quentin stood on the rooftop with his head held high, controlling the unmanned aircraft. When he saw the feedback, a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. So that's how it is. Was it because your body shrunk that I didn't notice you last time? You won't be able to escape this time. As Quentin spoke, red mist appeared in his hand again. This time, the mist swirled and condensed. However, it didn't form a wind elemental monster. Instead, it was mainly yellowish-brown sand, forming a huge sand monster. It was an earth elemental monster. Bring me the combat suit. Quentin ordered. The earth elemental monster immediately rushed toward the police station entrance. At this time, inside the police station, due to the mysterious disappearance of the detained prisoner, the police station had already sounded the alarm. Under the flashing red light, the police officers began to search in a mess. No one noticed. Scott, who had shrunk to the size of an ant, was under Hank's remote command to avoid being trampled by the police officers. He slipped out of the detention room through the crack in the door and finally came to a corner by the wall. What's that? Scott, who came here, was shocked. It was a group of ants. Each of them was the size of a cow. They rushed toward him and surrounded him. It's my partner. Hank was still explaining. The corner of Scott's mouth twitched as he looked at the ants that were as strong as cows in front of him. You want me to ride them like a car? No, it's not that. Hank had just finished speaking. Following the buzzing sound of a helicopter propeller, a flying ant that was twice the size of an ordinary ant slowly descended from a low altitude in front of Scott. You want me to ride it like a plane? I definitely don't want to. Scott's face was extremely pale. He shook his head back and forth with all his might. Scott, listen up. You have to sit on it. Hank was just about to open his mouth to persuade him when the door of the police station outside was suddenly blasted open like an explosion. A sandstorm quickly and violently poured in, instantly filling the corridor inside the police station. The flying ant that was hovering at a low altitude was hit by the sand and turned into a pile of mud that stuck to the wall. This is... Scott gulped. He looked up and saw a huge monster that was formed by sand at the front of the corridor. It withstood a series of gunfire from the police and was constantly approaching him. This sudden scene stunned even Hank, who was remotely controlling it, and he shouted, "Run, Scott! If I'm not wrong, that monster's target is the Ant-Man combat suit." Chapter 507. I don't need you to tell me. Scott was horrified. He climbed up the stairs and returned to the police station. Don't even think about running. In the corridor behind Scott, the earth elemental monster opened its hollow mouth and roared. The sand condensed into a pair of giant palms and slapped a few nearby police officers away. Its half-solid, half-illusory body ignored the gunshots and locked onto Scott, who was as small as an ant, to chase after him. Scott looked back and saw that the ants were all killed by the sand. He couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. Its target is definitely the battle suit I'm wearing. I encountered a similar wind monster this morning, and my friend was almost killed. Do you know what kind of monsters these are? I don't know. A few kilometers away, Hank shook his head. His imaginary enemy was the partner of the company who stole the formula for the PIM particles and created the wasp suit. Who would have thought that it would become a monster made of natural elements? Then can I trouble you to contact the Avengers for me? The symbol of peace or Iron Man, either one will do. Only people like them can deal with this kind of situation, right? Scott smiled bitterly and kept running faster. He passed through the gap of the closed iron door, but the earth elemental monster was hot on his heels. It knocked the iron door to the ground with a headbutt. The distance between the earth elemental monster and Scott kept shrinking. I don't know how to contact them either. Hank's eyes showed hesitation. He used to be an agent of SHELD, so he naturally knew how to contact SHELD, but he had left SHELD long ago and did not want to have anything to do with that organization. As for Iron Man, he was that man's son. Hank thought for a while and said in a deep voice, Scott, it's up to us now. I've already sent new flying ants over. Just hold on a little longer. How can we hold on? Scott's face was pale. While he was sprinting, he slid through the gap of the door. However, with a loud bang, the iron door was directly sent flying over his head. It rolled like a natural moat, blocking his escape route. Hank, where are your flying ants? Have you arrived yet? Scott's mouth was so dry that he swallowed his saliva. He retreated all the way to the end and pressed his back against the iron door that was blocking his way. He looked at the corridor in front of him and saw that the earth elemental monster had shrunk its body. Sand surged through the corridor and condensed into a fist that was half the size of a human body. It was like a meteor flying towards him. It's over, it's really over now. Scott subconsciously raised his hands and closed his eyes in despair. He could imagine himself turning into a pile of minced meat. At this critical moment, the wall of the corridor behind Scott suddenly exploded. A dark and strong figure rushed in and shielded Scott. At the same time, a dark fist carrying a strong wind collided with the earth elemental monster's fist. Bang! The earth elemental monster's fist, which was made of sand, immediately exploded like a sandbag. Unable to maintain the shape of a fist, the sand splattered everywhere. This is... Scott opened his eyes in shock and looked up. It was a muscular humanoid monster with a dark appearance. Its body had white tattoos that looked like they were left behind by flames. Its long and narrow eyes were completely white and emotionless. Hurry, get out of here. The dark monster that was blocking the earth elemental monster spoke in human language. Scott glanced sideways and realized that when the monster saved him, it had also crushed the iron door that was blocking it into pieces. He hurriedly nodded and continued to escape into the police station. Thank you, big black guy. Scott did not forget to turn back and leave a word of thanks. I'm a poison agent. Hearing this, the dark monster snorted in dissatisfaction. He was the combination of Eddie and poison. Perhaps Cale had already sensed that something was wrong with Quentin, or perhaps Cale had never trusted anyone other than his own family. That was why he had specially sent Eddie to protect Ant-Man's life in secret. I really don't understand. What's the point of the Master saving someone as weak as an ant? Eddie shook his head. The earth elemental monster took advantage of this moment to reform its solid body with sand and charged violently at Eddie. It's just a puppet. Use your real body to fight me. Eddie crossed his arms. The earth elemental monster crashed into his arms. Due to the huge difference in strength, the solid body made of sand crumbled into sand again. Battle suit, give me the battle suit. The earth elemental monster roared. After its body crumbled, it quickly reformed again and started a fierce battle with Eddie, who was blocking its movement, in the police station building. For a moment, the dust on the first floor of the police station was billowing, sweeping through everything inside. Both of them must be monsters. Scott fled into the police station, trembling in fear. The wall had been broken through by the poison agent, so he could see the bustling streets and the vast night sky outside. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A flying ant landed on the ground in front of him. This time, without needing Hank's reminder, Scott jumped onto the flying ant's broad back and grabbed its neck firmly with both hands. He urged, "Quick! Get me out of this godforsaken place." "That's right." Hank smiled and immediately controlled the flying ant remotely. The flying ant carried Scott out of the police station and kept rising. Whoosh! A cold gust of wind blew, and the flying ant narrowly dodged to the side. Scott, who was riding on the flying ant, was almost thrown off. "What's wrong now?" Scott screamed and hugged the flying ant even harder. Hank reminded him seriously, "Look down and you'll know." "Down there?" Scott looked down and vaguely saw a strange green figure, carrying a whistling wind behind him. Scott's face immediately paled. "It's that wind monster. Fly faster, fly faster." "Don't be noisy, I'm trying." Hank controlled the flying ant to dive down and try to fly toward the narrow alleys of the buildings. The wind elemental followed behind like a small moving tornado, destroying everything in its path. "Damn it, it can really run." Quentin stood on the rooftop of a commercial building nearby and looked down at the chaotic street area caused by the earth and wind elementals. His face turned slightly pale. Quentin definitely did not want to see large-scale chaos. If the Avengers, or even the symbol of peace, were attracted, things would be troublesome. "Forget it, let's call it a night." Quentin clenched his fists and glanced at the chaotic street below. He rode the red mist and disappeared into the night sky. "I'm going to faint, I'm going to faint." The flying ant carried Scott and flew at high speed. While he was unconscious, the wind elemental that had been chasing them finally disappeared. On the other side, in the ruined police station, Eddie looked at the earth elemental that had scattered into a pile of sand in front of him and shook his head. Did it run away again? Hearing the sirens of many police cars, Eddie did not continue to stay. He stepped on the ground and jumped to the rooftop of a building nearby. With a few superhuman leaps, he quickly left the scene. Chapter 508. The next morning. News of the terrorist attack on the New York Police Department last night, the disappearance of a fugitive, and the appearance of the three-headed monster with wind, earth, and darkness characteristics, as well as the chase and fight in the neighborhood, quickly spread among major websites and news media. It had only been half a year since the last war in New York, and now there was the alien war in London. Coupled with the continuous unnatural events in the past 2 days, the people of New York were in a state of panic, and the topic of world security and heroes escalated again. While the outside world was in an uproar, SHELD, the Avengers, Family Cal, and other supernatural forces fell into silence. They knew very well that this was just a small skirmish, just the ripples before the storm. At this time, in a private villa in New York. In one of the rooms on the second floor, Scott slowly woke up from the bed. His head was still throbbing, and he still remembered that when he escaped on the flying ant last night, the intense discomfort caused him to feel dizzy, and he eventually fainted. Scott forced his eyes open and scanned the unfamiliar room. When he saw a mature woman leaning against the door, looking at him quietly, Scott could not help but be stunned. Then, he jumped out of bed in shock. "You're awake. Come to the living room when you're awake." The woman glanced at Scott and left the room after saying that. 10 minutes later, in the reception room on the second floor of the villa, Scott sat on the sofa on one side, and opposite him sat Hank and his daughter. The Ant-Man uniform was on the table. "Scott, this is my daughter, Hope. She will teach you close combat skills and some practical martial arts." Hank waved at Hope as he introduced her. Hope narrowed her eyes and was still carefully sizing up Scott. Hank's eyes fell on the Ant-Man suit, and he said in a deep voice, "And I will teach you how to use this Ant-Man suit correctly, the relevant emergency maintenance skills, and how to make friends with ants." Wait a minute." Scott pushed his palms forward and interrupted them, saying, "Why do I have to learn and train these things? You've made me a fugitive, and I've been targeted by some unknown monsters. I've almost lost my life." Scott paused and continued bitterly, "It must be a mess out there right now. I might be wanted all over the country." "It's not a possibility. You're already wanted." Hopper casually threw out a newspaper. On the wanted list was Scott's photo and personal information. "I knew it." Scott rolled his eyes and slumped back onto the sofa. Hank said slowly and forcefully, "That's why you should join us and become an Ant-Man to destroy Claw's plan to sell the Wasp battle suit. If I succeed, I will help you get rid of the arrest warrant. Only then can we achieve a win-win situation. Then let's do it." Scott sighed and shrugged. "I don't have any other choice, do I?" Hank and Hopper looked at each other and smiled. Hence, the Ant People training plan was also the official beginning of the Ant People's suffering. During the day, Scott faced special training from Hopper. Although Hopper was a female white-collar worker, she had also learned martial arts and close combat skills in the past. Her combat skills completely outclassed the petty thief Scott. Within a few rounds, Scott was beaten to the ground and could not get up, wailing in pain. At night, Scott followed Hank to learn how to use and repair the Ant People battle suit. They also went through some shrinking and enlarging training. During this period, Scott found the controller of the battle suit troublesome and wanted to use tools to remove it. In the end, Hank found out and severely reprimanded him. If the Ant People battle suit doesn't have a controller, once it shrinks, it will become subatomic and enter the quantum realm without the concept of time and space. It will never be able to return to reality again. When Hank said this, there was a trace of unconcealable pain in his eyes. Scott was also secretly afraid and repeatedly promised not to touch the controller again. Just like that. After 5 days of special training, Scott and Hopper's sparring gradually became more and more frequent. Scott's understanding of the Ant-Man battle suit had also improved greatly. Then, it was time for the second round of training. Hank called Scott to the office. When Scott walked into the room, he found that there were photos of all kinds of ants hanging on the wall. There were also many professional theoretical and conceptual diagrams of ants. If you want to become an Ant People, not only do you have to understand the Ant People battle suit, but you also have to be familiar with your partners, the ants, Hank explained. Scott said incredulously, "You want me to be friends with them? How is that possible? Ants can't understand human language." As soon as he finished speaking, more than a dozen ants crawled on the table and put a piece of rock sugar into a hot coffee cup. Scott was shocked by this scene. He looked at the ants in disbelief and then at Hank. Hank pointed to the device on his ear and explained, "This is the device I made. It can communicate with ants in depth. Of course, you need to train day after day. Before the training begins, let me introduce your future companions. They are loyal, brave, and absolutely trustworthy." Hank turned his chair and looked at the 4 ant diagrams hanging on the wall behind him. The first diagram was of a small yellow ant. Mad ants, as fast as lightning, could conduct electricity, and could invade and destroy electronic equipment. The second diagram was of a small but strong ant. The bullet ant's bite was the most painful. The third diagram was of an ant as red as fire. Red ants, they were excellent builders. Their colony could be combined into different forms at will. The fourth diagram was of a black ant with wings. Craftsman ants, suitable for ground and air transportation. Ant people could also use them as flying mounts, so the flying ants that saved me last time were craftsman ants, Scott muttered to himself. Hank smiled and said, in the next few days, you have to enter the ant caves in the form of an ant person and become one of the ants. You have to be their companion and communicate with them. Interact with these ants on the spot? Scott's scalp went numb just thinking about it. He suddenly realized that his suffering had just begun. Unnatural firm, top floor office. That's the details. Eddie stood on the floor in front of the desk and reported with his head lowered. Since it's confirmed that Quentin has betrayed us, what else do you need me to say? Yutong's cold voice came from behind Eddie's chair. But Mr. Kale, Eddie was about to ask for Kale's opinion when he suddenly stopped. Poison's voice sounded in his mind, idiot, that man is here, in front of you. I understand, I will get rid of him as soon as possible. Eddie's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He changed the topic and left the top floor office in a hurry without waiting for Yutong's response. After the office door closed. As the office chair turned to face the front, Kale could be seen sitting on it. He was holding Yutong in one hand and reading the newspapers of the past few days in the other. A mysterious guest, Kale shook his head gently, a cold smile on his lips. Chapter 509. It had been a week since the attack on the police station. In the office on the second floor of Hank Pym's private villa. Scott was sitting on a chair in his Ant-Man uniform, playing with 4 different species of ants with his index finger. Especially the craftsman ant that had saved his life. Scott had even affectionately named it Anthony. Only God knew what kind of unbearable training Scott had gone through to become so intimate with these ants. The many bite marks on his body had yet to completely disappear. Hopper was still wearing a breathable vest, showing off her curvaceous figure. She suggested to her father, Hank, all right, no matter what, Scott has already become companions with the ants. He can be an entry-level Ant-Man now. It's time to implement our plan. If we delay any longer, Cross will sell out all the Wasp battle suits. To become a real Ant-Man, this level is far from enough. The Ant-Man's specialty, infiltration training, has yet to begin. Hank stared at Scott. Scott had a bitter expression, thinking that there would be more hellish training. However, Hank changed the topic and sighed helplessly. But Hopper is right. We're running out of time. We can only push ourselves beyond our limits. That means... Hopper looked at Hank with some excitement. Hank said unhappily, isn't my meaning clear enough? The plan to infiltrate Pym technology and steal the Wasp battle suits will officially begin tonight. Hopper and Scott were both overjoyed. They had trained hard for 7 days just for this moment. On the large desk in the office, there were many architectural blueprints of Pym technology. Even the sewers and electrical pipes were marked. Pym technology has added a lot of new security personnel during this period. The security will definitely be impenetrable. Hank held the blueprints while explaining the battle plan to Hopper and Scott. The best infiltration plan now is to let Hopper go to the company as the manager first to ensure the internal environment. Then, Scott and the fire ants would work together and enter the company through the sewers to take away the battle suits. If necessary, you can order the mad ants to destroy the server and escape the scene during the short period of blackout. No problem. Hopper nodded. I'm fine with it too. Scott nodded too. After the temporary training, the Ant-Man battle suit and the help of the ants had given him a lot of confidence. Since there are no problems, we'll officially start the operation at 8 o'clock tonight. Among the three of them, only Hank had a solemn expression. He had a premonition that tonight would not be as simple as he had imagined. That day, at 8 p.m. Hopper, who wore light makeup and a uniform, followed the plan and punched in through the entrance of PIM Technology Company. He ignored the security guards outside and entered the company without any obstruction. "Hello, manager." Many staff members greeted Hope warmly when they saw her coming to the company. Hope nodded with a smile. "Is the chairman here?" Hope asked the receptionist at the front desk. The receptionist hurriedly said, "Chairman Cross is in his office on the 5th floor, but he hasn't allowed anyone to enter his office recently. Do you need me to contact him?" "No need. I'll go up myself. I have something to talk to him face to face." Hope rejected the receptionist's suggestion. Without waiting for the receptionist's response, she went upstairs in her high heels. On the way to the office on the 5th floor, Hope passed by the 3rd floor and paused for a few seconds in the corridor. Through the partially transparent door, she could see the locked demonstration hall. Inside the exhibition pillar and anti-theft device, the Wasp battle suit was quietly placed inside. Target confirmed. "Scott, act according to the plan." Hope did not stay for long as she whispered into the small walkie-talkie in her collar. "I'm on my way." On the other side of the walkie-talkie, Scott's voice came out, accompanied by the sound of rushing water. Below the surface of PIM Technology Company's building, in a sewer that led to the bathroom. Using a group of fire ants as a boat, Scott, who was the size of a bug, was standing on the back of the fire ants and moving forward along the flow of water in the pipe. Another group of fire ants had been waiting above the pipe. They formed a rope and hung in the pipe leading to the 1st floor, waiting for Scott. In less than half a minute, Scott crawled out of the small hole at the bottom of the wash basin in the bathroom and asked Anthony to carry him to the location of the battle suit. He also asked the mad ants near the company's server to prepare. "Sounds like it's going quite smoothly." Hope smiled and came to the office on the 5th floor. She wanted to delay Cross for a while so that Scott could smoothly take the Wasp battle suit away. "Cross, are you there?" Hope knocked on the office door, but no one responded. "Cross?" After hesitating for a moment, Hope turned the doorknob. When the door opened, the scene that greeted her eyes shocked her. On the other side, Scott rode on Anthony and entered the demonstration hall through the vent. He saw the Wasp battle suit, the target of this plan, on the pillar of the platform in the hall. Scott jumped down from Anthony's back and returned to human size. Looking at the Wasp battle suit close at hand, he spoke into the walkie-talkie excitedly, "Hope, how are things on your side? I've successfully entered the target hall. Let's go." Hope's reply was trembling. "Scott, leave that place quickly." "What are you talking about?" "I'm about to get the battle suit." Scott was confused. He reached out to the display pillar with the built-in battle suit. "That's a trap." "Scott, leave quickly. Evacuate," Hope warned loudly. She was standing in the office on the 5th floor. There was no one else in the room, only a rotten corpse that had been dead for more than 7 days and was emitting a foul stench. Through the clothes and watch decorations on it, Hope recognized at a glance that the person who died in the office was Cross himself. However, if Cross was already dead, then who was the person who pretended to be Cross, announced that he had developed the Wasp battle suit, held a large-scale exhibition, and recently increased the company's security? What was his purpose? The more she thought about it, the more terrified she became. Hope could not help but cover her mouth. She was stunned by the facts in front of her. It turned out that the enemy she had been imagining had long been killed, and someone else wanted to steal the battle suit. On the 3rd floor, in the demonstration hall, Scott was a little dumbfounded. He looked at the intelligent aircraft in his hands. The Wasp battle suit and the exhibition platform in the room dimmed as a projection illusion. It really was a trap. Immediately after, the PIM Technology Company's internal alarms suddenly sounded. At this moment, on the rooftop of a business building next to PIM Technology, Eddie stood on the wall and looked down at the security guards who were alarmed by the company's alarm. He shook his head regretfully. Am I still too late? What a worrisome person. I have to clean up someone's mess again. Toxin in Eddie's body chuckled. Haven't you always been good at cleaning up people's mess? By the way, I forgot to remind you that someone is following you. Why didn't you say so earlier? Eddie grumbled. He turned around and said coldly, Who's there? Come out yourself, or should I go over and drag you out? *T. I've been discovered. From the shadow behind the water tank on the rooftop, a figure with a red and blue background slowly walked out. There was a conspicuous spider pattern on his clothes. It was Spider Peter, who had just entered high school. Ant-Man, Toxin, and Spider-Man. The three gathered like fate. Chapter 5:10. Under the night sky and the moon, on the rooftop of a tall building. Eddie, who was standing on the 100-meter-tall wall, looked at Spider-Man who walked out from the shadows. Realization dawned on his face. So it's you. What are you doing here instead of doing your homework at home? You, know me? Peter subconsciously took a step back as his identity was directly exposed. He was both surprised and nervous. He originally wanted to go out and try his luck, but he didn't run into the mysterious person who set the fire. Instead, he found Eddie, so he secretly followed him. Eddie smiled but didn't say anything. Not only because Kale paid attention to Peter, but Toxin also came into contact with Peter alone and copied and learned the spider talent from him. After the last battle in New York, Toxin had explained everything to Eddie. For all kinds of reasons, although Eddie had never seen Peter in person, he was very clear that under the cool mask of Spider-Man, there was just a big boy who had just entered high school and was still wet behind the ears. Kid, I don't have time to talk to you now. You'd better go home and sleep well. Eddie pouted as he looked down at PIM Technology, which was already in a mess. He waved his hand perfunctorily at Peter, then leaned back and fell directly from the rooftop wall. Hey! Peter was shocked when he saw this. He quickly rushed forward, put his hands against the wall, and poked his head out to look downstairs. Eddie fell naturally. When he was in mid-air, black liquid suddenly gushed out of his body, and a dark and tough biological membrane covered his body. In less than 3 seconds, Eddie, who was originally an ordinary person, had turned into a strong and dark humanoid monster. His long and narrow white eyes were wild and cold. He. Let's get to work. Eddie laughed sinisterly, bent his legs slightly, and then stepped on the outer wall of the building. Boom! As the solid outer wall collapsed inwards and a few layers of glass windows shattered, Eddie was like a cannonball that had been shot out of the barrel as he charged towards PIM Technology. Amazing! Who is he? Peter was shocked. At this moment, the scanning device attached to the suit beeped, and a melodious female voice sounded. That's Eddie, an employee of Unnatural Law Firm, an internal member of Family Cal, and a prospective member of the Avengers. He once cooperated with Hulk to defeat countless alien battleships in the Battle of New York. However, due to his multiple identities, his personal information is not known to outsiders. The voice came from the AI of the spider suit named Karen. This was something that Peter had discovered by accident the day before yesterday. Tawny was obviously worried about him, so he had installed a nanny-type AI on the suit. Karen, I almost forgot about your existence. Peter slapped his forehead and looked at Eddie's receding figure. He said slowly, so he's one of Mr. Kale's men. Wait a minute. No matter what, I'm still treated as a child. Recalling Eddie's words, Peter could not help but grit his teeth. The AI Karen said seriously, Peter, you're only about 16 years old. You're still underage. You're indeed considered a child. I'm not a child. I must make some achievements to show Mr. Stark and Mr. Kale. Peter took a deep breath and jumped down the stairs. Along the way, he shot out spider silk and swung it in the direction Eddie left. At this time, inside PIM technology, sharp and frequent alarms sounded everywhere. The security personnel carried firearms and rushed to the demonstration hall on the 3rd floor where the alarms were triggered. Not good, we have to get out of here. Scott's face was pale as he smashed the unmanned aircraft in his hand on the ground and said to Hopper on the other side of the walkie-talkie. Scott, don't worry about me. Get out of here. Hopper's response was extremely weak and carried a hint of fear. What's wrong with you? From Hopper's strange tone, Scott suddenly had a bad feeling. Go, I'm fine. On the 5th floor of PIM Technology, in the chairman's office, Hopper was retreating into the room. She was facing a man who looked exactly like Cross standing at the door. Who are you? Hopper stared coldly at the man at the door. You're really here. The mysterious man sized up Hopper and then looked at the rotten corpse on the office chair. He smiled eerily. You can call me the mysterious guest. While the mysterious guest was talking, the disguised Cross appearance twisted and changed. Under the cover of a red mist, the mysterious guest quickly changed back to the appearance of wearing a glass helmet and a cloak. What do you want to do? Hopper forced herself to calm down and continued to ask. You'll know soon enough. The mysterious guest extended his hands forward. A red mist gushed out and bound Hopper, who was retreating. While Hopper was struggling, the mysterious guest controlled the energy mist and snatched the mini walkie-talkie from her. You! Hopper's beautiful eyes widened as she looked at him angrily. With the mini walkie-talkie in his hand, the mysterious guest ignored Hopper and said to the walkie-talkie, if you want to save your girlfriend, bring the Ant-Man battle suit to the 5th floor. Without waiting for Scott's response, the mysterious guest crushed the mini walkie-talkie and looked at Hopper, who was struggling in the red mist. Damn it! In the demonstration hall on the 3rd floor, Scott clenched his fists. Without thinking too much, he shouted, Anthony, and pressed the small button on the battle suit's controller. To the 5th floor. Scott flipped over and sat on Anthony's back. Under his command, Anthony flapped his wings and flew out of the demonstration hall through the air vent, fearlessly flying toward the 5th floor. Along the way, facing the security guards who rushed over, Scott, who had shrunk, arrived at the company's 5th floor without any obstruction. As soon as Anthony flew to the corridor on the 5th floor, Scott saw Hopper, who had collapsed in front of the office door. He jumped down from Anthony's back and returned to his original human size, supporting the limp Hopper. You shouldn't have come. This is a trap. Hopper struggled to stand up from the ground and gasped. Even if it's a trap, I still want to come. Scott looked straight at Hopper, his eyes full of determination. Hopper's heart was warmed. Just as she was about to say something, a monster growl came from the side. A brownish-yellow earth elemental monster crawled out of the office, a green wind elemental monster blocked the staircase on the 5th floor, and a blue water elemental monster appeared at the end of the corridor. Elementals. 4 against 2. Will you obediently hand over the battle suit, or die here with Cross? The mysterious guest floated in the air on the 5th floor with his cape fluttering in the wind, looking down at Scott and Hopper from above. Chapter 5:11. The earth elemental monster was formed from hard sand and rocks. Its brown body was the size of a small hill, and every move it made gave people a strong sense of oppression. The wind elemental monster was formed from the whistling wind in the void. Its body was drifting between virtual and physical, and the overflowing whirlwind kept sweeping and washing away the items inside the company. The water elemental monster was formed from the water flowing out of the pipe. As the water flowed out, its water body kept expanding, completely blocking one side of the escape route. There are actually 3 energy monsters of this level? Scott opened his arms to protect Hopper. He looked around and saw the elemental monsters and the mysterious guests surrounding them. He swallowed his saliva. Just one elemental monster was already very difficult to deal with. Scott, who had just become a second-generation Ant-Man, did not have the confidence to win against one of the elemental monsters in a one-on-one situation. Moreover, Scott had to protect the injured Hopper and deal with 3 super-large monsters with different elemental characteristics at the same time, as well as the mysterious guest who was eyeing them covetously. This is really troublesome. Scott frowned. He could not think of a way to escape at that moment. Even if he shrunk Hopper, the wind elemental monster, which was good at controlling the air, would tear them to pieces before they could even ride on Anthony. Scott. Hopper's face was pale. She put her delicate hand on Scott's shoulder and said in a firm voice, "You should know that you can't escape with me. You have to leave now. If the Ant-Man battle suit falls into the wrong hands, it will be a disaster for the world. Hopper, stop talking. I will never leave you behind. Besides..." Scott and Hopper were only halfway through their conversation when they raised their eyes to look at the mysterious man hovering in the air in front of them. Scott smiled bitterly as he continued, "He has put in so much effort to set up this situation. Do you think he will just stand by and watch me escape from here? I am the one who got you into this." Hopper clenched her fists and bit her lips. Scott thought of his daughter. He shrugged and said with a smile, "It's too late to say anything now, unless there is a miracle. But being able to die with you doesn't seem to be the worst thing." Hearing Scott's words, the mysterious guest spread out his hands and chuckled. "Yes, you can only pray to the heavens now, boom." At this moment, as if confirming the mysterious guest's words, on the rooftop of PIM Technology, there was a deafening boom as if something heavy had hit it. "This is..." While the mysterious guest was still in shock, the chandelier hanging on the ceiling of the 5th floor fell and landed on his glass helmet. However, the chandelier did not seem to have hit anything. It went right through the mysterious guest's head to his feet and continued to fall down the stairs without any hindrance. "Scott, did you see that?" Hopper's eyes lit up when he saw this strange scene. "I saw it." Scott nodded. Staring at the mysterious guest, he said in a low voice, "Speaking of which, the Wasp battlesuit I saw in the demonstration hall just now was also a projection created by the intelligent aircraft." "You mean?" Hopper looked at Scott in surprise. "We might have a chance to escape from here." Scott put his mouth close to Hopper's and whispered in her ear. His hot breath on Hopper's face made her pale face turn pink. "What are you guys still discussing?" The mysterious guest hovering in the air looked at the two and sneered. "All tricks are useless in the face of absolute power. Elementals, what are you waiting for? Go!" The 3 elementals heard the order and roared. They rushed toward Scott and Hopper in an encirclement. Scott and Hopper did not move at all, as if they were waiting for something. The moment before the elemental monster approached them, Scott shouted into the walkie-talkie that was tuned to another channel, "Brothers of the Mad Ants, now is the time." In the central computer room of PIM Technology, the yellow mad ants that had crawled to the server and were on standby began to gnaw and conduct electricity when they heard Scott's late order. In less than half a second, the power supply to the entire PIM Technology building was cut off. All the security and water and electricity systems failed. A small pulse of electric current was formed and spread from the server center to the building. In the corridor on the 5th floor, the 3 elementals were about to crash into Scott, but under the spread of the electric current, their movements suddenly froze. Like a movie that was paused halfway, the originally huge and terrifying monster gradually split into dozens of projection beams. The source was the intelligent aircraft that was originally invisible to the naked eye. Yes. There were 20 intelligent aircraft flying in the air inside the company. The projections they released were pieced together into the elementals. Just as I thought. Scott looked at the mysterious guest in the air again. At this time, the mysterious guest's body showed signs of freezing and snowflakes. Obviously, it was also a projection illusion. "Anthony!" Scott shouted. After Anthony flew down from the corner, he quickly threw a dart. After the dart hit Anthony's body, Anthony's originally small body immediately became bigger than a person. "Quick! Take Hopper away." Scott helped Hopper onto Anthony's back. When he saw the intelligent aircraft shooting at him, he slapped Anthony's butt hard to make it fly away. He pressed the button on the controller to shrink in time and avoided the concentrated fire in the form of a small Ant-Man. PIM technology, in a hidden room. Quentin, who was wearing a high-tech helmet and casual clothes, had a gloomy expression. He threw the remote control of the aircraft on the ground. He did not expect the other party to see through it. Those elementals were just a projection illusion of the aircraft. Originally, I wanted to rely on my own ability and not waste too much of the energy given by the Lord. But now, I can't care so much. Quentin sighed softly. A faint red glow appeared in his eyes. He opened his hands, and 2 streams of red mist energy gathered in his palms and kept spinning and growing. 2 structures. At best, it was a high-tech camouflage, a cross-century technology that could pass off as the real thing. But this fantasy technology, once combined with the ether energy, the power of reality gems, that could materialize illusions, the effect would be completely different. The enlarged craftsman ant, Anthony, flapped its wings, creating a gust of wind. It carried Hopper through the glass on the 5th floor of the company and disappeared into the vast night sky outside. After successfully sending Hopper out of PIM technology, Scott was much more relaxed. As he dodged the shots, he sprinted and leaped from the corridor, temporarily returning his body to its original state. He knocked down several flying aircraft that were shooting at him. The moment he landed, he turned into an Ant-Man and fled downstairs. Scott led a group of intelligent aircraft and rushed toward the security guards downstairs. He kept passing through the gaps at their feet. When the intelligent aircraft collided with the security guards, a war between humans and machines was inevitable. Chapter 5:12. In the corridor and lobby on the 3rd floor of the company, the servers had gone out of control, and the lights inside were pitch black. Only a dozen or so special light bulbs were still dimly lit. When the security personnel who were searching for the intruders collided with the AI aircraft that was chasing after the Ant-Men, the security personnel could not help but be stunned. The AI aircraft also paused for a moment. "Those are the intruders' aircraft. Shoot them down." A voice suddenly came from the security personnel. The other security personnel did not think too much and immediately raised their guns and fired at the flying aircraft. Many of the aircraft were destroyed on the spot. Self-defense mode activated. Target enemy priority changed. The AI aircraft was not to be outdone. Its flashing green light turned red, and then it turned around and fired at the security personnel below. In less than 10 seconds, the war between humans and machines was about to break out. The interior of PIM technology was reduced to a chaotic battlefield of cannon fire. "I'm too smart." Looking at the chaotic battle behind him, Scott, who was in his Ant-Man form, let out a sigh of relief. After getting rid of the flying machine, he ran up to the 2nd floor. Scott changed the channel on the walkie-talkie. After a delayed busy tone, Hank Pym's anxious voice came. "Is this Scott? How are you guys? Have you completed the operation?" "It's fake." Scott answered as he ran. "It's all fake. Not only the Wasp combat suit, even the person in charge of PIM technology is not cross. It's an unknown enemy in disguise and set up all of this. Their goal is the 1st-generation Ant-Man combat suit on me." "What did you say?" Hank on the other side of the communicator was also shocked. However, as an Ant-Man, he quickly calmed down and asked, "Are the two of you okay? I asked Anthony to take Hope away from the company. You can go and meet them. I'm still on the company's stairs. I'll be on the first floor soon." Scott came to the last step on the second floor and jumped again. The stairs were like a hill to his body, but the unique characteristics of the PIM particles allowed him to retain the strength and jumping ability of a hominid human, allowing him to jump several meters down the stairs. As soon as he landed on the stairs on the first floor, a large shadow fell towards him. Scott reacted quickly and looked sideways. He saw an earth elemental monster waiting in the hall on the first floor. After seeing him, the earth elemental monster immediately reached out and slapped him. "Again? I won't fall for the same trick twice." Scott had wanted to ignore the earth elemental's attack, but when he saw that the attack was about to hit him, a bell rang in his heart. It was as if something terrible would happen if he didn't avoid it. Without any hesitation, Scott followed his body's instinct and jumped out of the staircase. However, he was still a step too late. The earth elemental's giant palm brushed against his body, and he flew out as if he had been hit hard. In midair, his body also returned to its normal human form from the Ant-Man. The earth elemental monster's palm continued to fall and pressed against the tempered glass corridor. The corridor immediately broke and collapsed, turning into countless glass shards. A few of the shards fell beside Scott, who was lying on the ground and holding his injured left shoulder. His pupils contracted violently as he looked at the earth elemental monster roaring and raging in disbelief. This time, it was real. A real earth elemental monster, not a fake projection. "Are you okay, Scott?" Hank heard the loud noise and asked Scott anxiously. "I'm fine for now, but I might be in trouble soon." Scott smiled bitterly. He struggled to get up from the ground and stared at the earth elemental monster that was approaching him. He took out 2 capsules from his pocket. These were the secret weapons he had prepared for the earth elemental monster when he was training with the Ant-Men. Come on, come on. If it's just one earth elemental monster, should be able to win." Scott breathed rapidly to calm himself down. The earth elemental monster didn't care so much. The 5-meter-tall giant made of sand and stone took a step forward, and a pair of rock-like fists smashed towards him. The moment the fists fell, Scott moved. First, he jumped forward to dodge the fists, and at the same time, he passed under the earth elemental monster's crotch. He threw the capsule that he had been holding in his palm at the lower part of the monster made of sand and stone. The super-small capsule hit the earth elemental monster's foot, and with a bang sound, it turned back into a super-large capsule with a radius of 3 meters. After the thin rubber cover of the outer shell was broken, the water inside the capsule exploded like a deep-water bomb. Water counters Earth. After being hit by a large amount of water, the earth elemental monster howled. Its limbs made of sand and stone collapsed, and its huge giant body also fell to the ground. "It's working." Scott's eyes lit up. After he escaped from the police station last time, in order to deal with the earth elemental monster, he specially made the water ball capsule weapon. He didn't expect that it would really come in handy. One water ball capsule after another, more powerful than the bombardment of artillery shells, continuously smashed on the earth elemental monster's body, causing the sand and stone that made up its body to continuously dissipate. When Scott threw out the last capsule, the water destroyed the core of the earth elemental. After the red energy hidden inside dissipated, it completely turned into a mass of wet sand. Phew, fortunately, there is enough stock. Scott breathed a sigh of relief. But under his gaze, the accumulated water in the hall on the first floor suddenly gathered together on its own, and like the previous sand, it formed the limbs and facial features. Water elemental monster, again, is there an end to this? Scott's smile froze on his face. He felt a chill on the back of his neck. He looked back with a pale face, but it was a green tornado that swept away the sand and glass along the way. Wind elemental monster, this is troublesome. Scott didn't prepare in advance to deal with the wind elemental monster and the water elemental monster. Only escape? Scott just thought of this, and above his head, from the roof of the company building, there was another roar of a heavy object falling. Gotcha! A crack bloomed on the ceiling of the 5th floor, and then the crack continued to expand. Finally, the ceiling collapsed, and 2 figures, one black and one red, fell from above. I told you not to chase me, go back and do your homework, kid. I won't. Change the way you call me. As if realizing that they were about to fall to the ground, the 2 entangled figures let go of each other tacitly. One of them directly touched the bottom of the floor with his feet, and the floor cracked under the powerful impact. The other person shot out spider silk midway, and slightly swayed in the air to cushion the fall speed. You are? Scott looked at the 2 people who came from the sky with a blank face. One of them was tall and burly with dark and white flame patterns, and his strong muscles seemed to be the strongest armor. The other person had blue and red spider stripes, and his body was relatively short, but the tight uniform still showed the texture of muscles. It was Poison Agent Eddie and Spider-Man Peter. Chapter 5:13. After nightfall, the lights in New York City lit up, the stars flickered, and the late summer night breeze was cool and pleasant. Looking from the outside. Now PIM technology was in total darkness. Gunshots, explosions, and human screams could be heard from time to time from inside the building. In the unguarded yard outside the company building, a spark suddenly lit up, and then the spark spun into a wheel at high speed, and a gorgeous and wonderful circular portal was completed. A foot wearing high heels and black stockings stepped out of it. An extremely beautiful woman walked out of it. Her facial features were tight and fair, and her long black hair fluttered in the wind, as if she was a beauty who walked out of a portrait. The woman raised her pale silver eyes and looked at the place where she arrived. She opened her mind slightly and said softly, "Boss, they have started. It's time." Accompanied by a calm and cold deep male voice, a silver-haired young man walked out of the portal. His chiseled face was not handsome, but it had an indescribable mature charm. He looked like an ordinary person, but his every move contained enough pressure to shake the air. At Kale's level, he had already completely taken the power of the Protoss bloodline as his own, and it was no longer just a card draw. Instead of calling him a god, it was more appropriate to call him a demigod, but he was the strongest demigod. "Boss. Should we intervene?" Yutong winked playfully. She was charming and calm on the outside, but only in front of Kale would she show her girlish side. "No need. It's just a mysterious guest, he just borrowed part of the gem's power." Kale had no intention of making a move tonight. An ordinary villain who could only use projection illusions, even with the gem's power, was not half as good as Thanos' generals. And there were also Poison Agent, Ant-Man, and Spider-Man. With these 3 heroes of the new generation, it would be bullying if he and Yutong joined the battle. King against king, general against general, and pawn against pawn. Let's just watch. Sensing that someone was running out of the yard, Kale waved his left hand, and a magic seal appeared on the ring on his finger. Corresponding to the spell card in his body, it immediately played the spell effect. A ripple of glass swept through the air. Kale and Yutong were still standing in the courtyard, but it was a world away from the courtyard in the real world. 2 security guards, covered in dirt and covered in wounds, ran out of the house in a sorry state. They turned a blind eye to Kale who was standing at the door. Mirror World. It was one of the best spells used by Earth's mages to observe the real world. It was also the main reason why they were difficult to be detected by the world. Even if they knew their existence and location, others would not be able to find them. "Let's go." Kale walked in front and led Yutong into PIM technology. As soon as they stepped into the hall, 2 figures wrapped in waves of water rushed toward them. After passing by them, they slammed hard against the inner wall of the hall on the first floor, splashing water everywhere. Kale looked sideways and saw that Spider-Man and Ant-Man were drenched and lying on the inner wall. Because they were both wearing hoods, their faces could not be seen clearly. They looked like brothers in distress. Yutong almost laughed out loud. She covered her mouth and looked at Kale beside her. They still need to be trained and grow. Kale shook his head. The little Spider-Man and the second-generation Ant-Man were both like ducks on a perch. They were born a year or two earlier than the original story. These two insect heroes were the true, new generation. Rumble. In the battle at the front of the hall, the one who truly had the power to fight against the water elemental and wind elemental monsters was the poison agent, Black Demon, Lethal Guardian, Eddie. He was also the only mysterious dark hero who had multiple identities and multiple nicknames. His performance is not bad. You can consider giving him a raise, Yutong commented with a smile. How is this not bad? Kale still shook his head and squinted at the poison agent who was at a disadvantage under the siege of the water and wind elementals. Poison is far better than venom in terms of talent and growth, but now even the two elemental monsters created by the energy of the gems can't be defeated head-on. Even if he was at the peak of human beings in World War II, with the underage venom, it is estimated that he could kill several of these elemental monsters. Boss, times are different, Yutong reminded Kale in a disguised way that in peacetime, the requirements for actual combat should not be too harsh. After all, unlike during wartime, people would save up every day and throw themselves into battle and killing. Of course I know. Kale nodded gently. The gap between the new generation of heroes and the old generation of heroes is basically the gap in combat experience. This is also why the little Spider-Man, who is far superior to Captain America in terms of strength and talent, is still not as powerful as Captain America. That piggy. Hero? Should we run first? Scott got up with the help of the inner wall and suggested to Peter next to him. It's Spider-Man. Peter also got up with difficulty, first correcting Scott's mistake, and then resolutely said, no matter what, I have to fight. If I give up here, then I won't be a hero, and I will fail to live up to the expectations of those two gentlemen. He stretched out his hands forward, and the spider silk shot out separately and stuck to the railing on the second floor. Under the pull of several tons of extraordinary power, the entire metal railing was pulled down and smashed on the head of the water elemental monster, slightly relieving the pressure on the poison agent who was confronting it head-on. Peter wiped the water droplets from his eyes and continued to rush forward to join the battlefield. These days, even underage children are so desperate. How can I back down? Scott sighed helplessly. He wanted to escape, but Eddie and Peter chose to stay and fight, making him give up the idea. For some reason, there is always a thought of not wanting to fall behind them. Moreover, the enemy behind the scenes who controlled these two monsters has repeatedly attacked him, and even a clay figurine has a bit of a temper. If he can get rid of the other party here, Scott had an idea and looked ahead at the poison agent and Spider-Man who were fighting with the water and wind elemental monsters, and shouted at them, these elemental monsters were all created by a man. It's useless even if we get rid of the elemental monsters. We have to find the man behind the scenes. I can't leave here. Eddie crossed his hands and took a hard punch from the water elemental, standing with his head held high under the impact of the water. Karen, can you find him? Peter used the spider silk to swing high, avoiding the slap of the wind elemental monster, and lowered his head to ask the AI that came with the battle suit. Karen quickly replied, below. A weak electromagnetic signal is coming from the basement 10 meters below the company. Fortunately, the server of the company building was destroyed by the mad ants, and a scan easily found the location of the suspected enemy behind the scenes. It's in the basement below, but I can't leave now. Peter was halfway through his words when he was sucked in by the tornado of the wind elemental. Hold on, I'll go. Scott shouted, pressed the controller, turned into the size of an insect, and jumped into the broken underground pipe. finally found the key to victory. In the mirror dimension, Kale smiled faintly, looking at the poison agent and Spider-Man who were fighting side by side in front of him. He felt inexplicably happy. Chapter 5:14. In his previous life, it seemed that no matter which version it was, Spider-Man and the symbiotic creatures were both enemies and friends. And there were many similarities between the two, such as the style of external armor, superhuman strength and physique, the ability to shoot silk, and so on. It was just that Spider-Man was good at defeating his opponents with skill, while the symbiotic creatures were more inclined to defeat their enemies with violence. Chi! Two spider silks popped out from the tornado created by the wind elementals and stuck to the left and right inner walls of the hall on the first floor. Holding the other end of the spider silk tightly in his palm, the little Spider-Man Peter hung in the air with difficulty, no longer being ravaged by the tornado like a washing machine stirring clothes. "I can't hold on any longer." Peter's voice was a little distorted in the strong wind. If he wasn't wearing the spider hood at this time, his mouth would have been blown open by the wind. Under the several tons of grip, the spider silk he was holding still kept slipping away, and his small body was about to be sucked back into the tornado. A dark and tall figure suddenly jumped up. A large hand reached out and grabbed him by the collar as if he was a chicken, bringing him away from the tornado. Thank you." Peter looked back and saw that it was the poison agent who was confronting the water elementals. "Boy, hurry up and go back. You can't help here." Eddie gasped for hot air, his mouth opened ferociously, and his tongue swung left and right like a snake's tongue. In the more than 10 years of wandering in the stars, the poison had attached itself to many alien species and monsters, so its deformed appearance was far from pure venom. But at this time, Peter felt that the hideous and terrifying poison agent in front of him, like a dark villain, was as amiable as his predecessor. Peter was suspended in the air with one hand by Eddie, his limbs hanging down, and said stubbornly, "Mr. Eddie, I want to fight, let me continue to fight. I can help you. I can definitely help. How do you know my name?" Aid was stunned for a moment before he retreated without hesitation. A water column with a radius of 3 meters crashed down on the spot where the two of them had been standing just a moment ago. The water elemental monster let out a furious roar. After its attack failed, it continued to attack with its palm, and half of its palm turned into a 5-meter-tall wave of water. The wind elemental monster cooperated and created a strong gust of wind. Under the support of the wind, the waves also had the characteristic of rotation, flowing quickly and quickly. In an instant, under the combination of the two elemental monsters, Feng Shui and Feng Shui, in the lobby on the first floor of Pym Technology Company, strong winds blew and waves surged, forming a destructive scene at the corner of a large-scale storm on the sea. Eddie's pupils contracted slightly as he jumped onto the inner wall. Just like Peter, he was able to ignore Newton's law and hang upside down on the wall. He looked at Peter in his hand and sighed helplessly. "All right, then what can you do?" Peter was overjoyed at the unexpected good news, and said with excitement, I have great strength." He reacted very quickly. When you sense danger, your body shudders. While wearing this spider suit, you can use the AI lady to observe the enemy. Are there any moves or skills? Eddie began to run along the inner wall as the waves chased after them, wanting to completely drown the two of them. Moves? Peter muttered to himself. Suddenly, he thought of something and said, "There is a sure kill mode, but I can't use it now." "Oh right, my spider silk can be transformed into other characteristics, such as the conductive electric shock web." Eddie's body suddenly paused as he was almost swallowed by the waves that flooded the lobby. He ran to buy time while asking to confirm, "Discharge electricity, are you sure you can discharge electricity?" Peter looked down at his hands and gritted his teeth, "I'm not sure, after all, I haven't used that mode much, but I can give it a try." "Then let's give it a try." At the same time, Eddie took a deep breath and looked at the wind elemental monster in the lobby. He suddenly took the initiative to step on the inner wall and jumped over like a cannonball. The waves with the support of the strong wind came crashing towards him. Eddie crashed into the waves and splashed countless water. "Go, Spider Boy!" Unable to move forward under the pressure of feng shui, Eddie's right hand muscles bulged. Using all the strength in his body, he threw Peter forward like a grenade. Peter only felt the waves and wind pressure churning. His vision blurred, and he broke out of the strong feng shui waves. Inertia continued, and he fell into the body of the wind elemental monster. That's, on the shiny black goggles of Peter's spider hood, 2 clusters of crimson energy were reflected. These elemental monsters that did not have a limited form actually had an unknown energy cluster in their bodies as the source. In a short moment, Peter understood Eddie's intention and subconsciously raised his hands and made a gesture of shooting spider silk. Now, 2 spider silks shot out, but unlike before, the spider silk this time was conductive. As soon as it touched the red energy cluster, it immediately burst out with a pulse of electric current. Buzz. Although the electric current attached to the spider silk was small, it was enough to determine the outcome of the battle at this moment. As the electric current destroyed the energy core of the gem, the original wind elemental monster could no longer maintain its form. Walla walla. A large amount of water spurted out from the first floor of PIM technology, and the windows and doors became drainage outlets. It rushed out of the yard and gradually subsided. Everything on the first floor had been washed away, leaving nothing but emptiness. Only on the wet and clean floor, Poison Agent and Spider-Man sat back to back. The former released the symbiotic form, while the latter took off his hood, his chest heaving up and down as he panted. "Kid, you're not bad. I approve of you," Eddie said slowly. Peter was surprised. "How did you know that their weakness is in the core?" "I guessed." "Guessed?" Hearing Eddie's answer, Peter was stunned. "Guessed? You just threw me over? You weren't sure if you could successfully release the electric shock?" Eddie spread his hands and complained to Peter. "It's a pass." In the mirror world, Kyle calmly commented as he watched everything that was happening in the hall. His early training was not in vain. "Now, let's see what happens next." Yutong smiled charmingly. In the sewer of PIM technology, Scott stood on the back of a group of fire ants and flowed down with the current. After many twists and turns, he followed the water pipe and finally broke out of the drainage pipe. This was a basement warehouse where high-tech equipment was stored. A lot of equipment was stored here. There was an old-fashioned generator in the basement that still provided electricity for this floor, and the lights were still on. As soon as Scott entered the room, he saw the mysterious guest, Quentin, who was wearing a glass helmet and sitting on a computer chair in the basement. Quentin also noticed him and coldly raised his head to look at him. Scott took the initiative to return to human size and said in a deep voice, "So, from the beginning until now, you're just one person. And there are 3 of us. 3 against 1, you're bound to lose. Look behind you." Quentin smiled. "Are you trying to trick me? I've completely seen through your little trick." Scott snorted coldly, but felt a heat coming from his back. He frowned and moved his eyes behind him. He saw a pile of equipment burning fiercely, and the lava gradually condensed into a brand new giant monster. The fire elemental monster that had never appeared before finally appeared. Quentin smiled. "You think I didn't think of this situation? You're not the only ones with backup plans, I have one too." Chapter 5:15. Quentin's laughter rang in his ears. Scott looked up in surprise. The fire elemental monster that appeared in front of him was the same as the 3 elemental monsters from before. It had a huge and burly monster body constructed from specific elements. However, fire elemental monsters had characteristics that were completely different from other elemental monsters. After the fire elemental monster was created, it did not attack Scott immediately. Instead, it burned and devoured the equipment and parts of the building in the basement. Even the iron frames and reinforced concrete were melted into hot lava. The lava strengthened the fire elemental monster's body. It looked as if it was constantly devouring foreign objects to achieve its goal of self-growth. In less than 10 seconds, the fire elemental monster had transformed from a 3-meter-tall body into a 6-meter-tall lava giant. Its head melted through the ceiling of the basement. Its bloated lava body filled half of the basement. The high temperature made Scott sweat profusely. He subconsciously took a few steps back. Perfect. This is the perfect ultimate war monster. It truly exists and is not a fake body created by a secondary projection setting, Quentin mumbled to himself. His face was filled with fanaticism. He looked at the fire elemental monster with an infatuated expression. The fire elemental monster's act of devouring foreign objects to strengthen itself did not show any signs of stopping. Instead, its devouring speed increased. The flames and high temperature enveloped the entire basement. Even Quentin's glass helmet was filled with mist. "What have you done?" Scott's face grew paler. This fire elemental monster gave him a terrible feeling. If the earth, wind, and water elemental monsters from before were considered powerful enemies that were difficult to deal with, then this fire elemental monster was like the incarnation of disaster. If he could not stop it here, there might be terrible consequences. Quentin took off his glass helmet. His face was red under the illumination of the flames. He explained excitedly, "In the secondary simulation data, the fire elemental monster is the most powerful battle-type creature. In order to create its physical body, I used up all the energy that the Lord gave me. The amount of ether energy that supplied the fire elemental monster to move was more than the total amount of ether energy from the other 3 elemental monsters. This finally allowed the fire elemental monster's special talent to show. Devour, evolve. The fire elemental monster could burn and devour any object to strengthen its body. It would continue to evolve and grow until it completely destroyed the life planet it was on. As long as I have it, I won't be afraid of symbols of peace or Iron Man. Even if they arrive now, it's too late." Quentin could not help but smile. He strode past Scott and walked towards the fire elemental monster. The fire elemental monster seemed to have sensed something. It stopped burning and devouring and lowered its head to look at Quentin, who had arrived in front of it. No emotions could be found in the eyeless molten lava frames. "Fire elemental, I'm your master, Quentin. Let us create an era that belongs to us. Burn all the obstacles that dare to block our path into nothingness." Quentin opened his arms and exclaimed passionately. The fire elemental nodded as if it understood. Quentin turned around excitedly and pointed at Scott. "Now, kill that little ant. It's time for this farce to end. Only by killing him will that old man Hank Pym yield." The fire elemental monster continued to nod. It slowly raised its molten lava left hand and slapped forward, sending Quentin, who was standing in front of it, flying. Quentin flipped a few times in the air and crashed into the inner wall of the basement with a thud. He then slowly slid down. Quentin immediately spat out blood after taking that slap with his human body. Not only was his external body severely burned, his internal organs were also injured by the impact. He would not survive. This dramatic scene stunned the tense Scott. Even Quentin, who was lying on the ground, severely injured and on the verge of death, widened his eyes. Why? Quentin wanted to scream, but his throat was burned by the molten lava. He could not speak with an accurate pitch. At the last moment of his life, Quentin suddenly understood, to the fire elemental, the biggest obstacle in its path was not anyone else but itself, its useless creator. This way, no one can stop you. Quentin closed his eyes in peace when he thought that Earth would be destroyed by the fire elemental in the end. He actually killed the person who created him. Playing with fire? Scott's heart was in turmoil. His body was tense. He looked at Quentin's body on the ground and then looked at the fire elemental monster. After killing Quentin, the fire elemental monster's empty molten lava eye sockets also looked at Scott. It opened its mouth to both sides as if it was laughing. A giant molten lava hand was raised high again. Not good. Scott's expression changed. He turned and ran. He did not rush to the basement door at the side. Instead, he rushed to the bathroom inside. He aimed his gaze at the drain hole. His thumb, which had already been placed on the control button of the Ant-Man battle suit, suddenly pressed down in coordination. PIM Technology Company, first floor lobby. Eddie had just reached out to pull Peter up from the ground. Their hair was still wet. Just as they were about to say something, they suddenly frowned and looked down at the ground. At the same time, they sensed an extremely ominous and destructive aura. Toxin whispered a warning, "Eddie, be careful. Something terrible has appeared underground." Eddie nodded solemnly. His body was covered with the dark keratin membrane again. He entered the battle form of the symbiotic demon. Peter also arched his body slightly. All the hair on his body stood on end. A chill lingered in his heart. This is, in the mirror dimension, Kale's calm face finally showed some surprise. Crack, a crack bloomed from the floor of the lobby. Then, it kept forking and branching. The cracks were quickly densely packed like a spider web. A powerful flow of energy surged to the ground from below. At this moment, Eddie and Peter reacted extremely quickly. One on the left and one on the right, they dodged to the sides in advance. Almost as soon as they left the center of the lobby, the floor cracked from the bottom to the top. Scorching red molten lava spewed out from it, shooting up to 10 meters high. It was like a disaster scene of a small volcanic eruption. Under the shocked gazes of Eddie and Peter, there was first a molten lava hand, then a molten giant head. Then, the entire body of the fire elemental crawled out from the ground. The surrounding objects covered in molten lava began to burn and melt, becoming a part of its body. "No way, there's another one." Peter opened his mouth wide in horror. "It's different. It's completely different. This one is completely incomparable to the previous ones." Eddie opened his long and narrow white eyes wide. He clenched his dark fists as if he was facing a great enemy. "Quick, get out of here with me." Returning from the size of an ant to its human form, Scott appeared out of nowhere and shouted at Eddie and Peter. Chapter 5:16. Poison Agent Eddie, Spider-Man Peter, and Ant-Man Scott rushed out of PIM Technology. Almost as soon as they stepped out of the door, the company building behind them collapsed with a rumble. Hot lava spewed up dozens of meters high, illuminating the night sky red. That night, people in New York could see it if they looked up. Rumble, the bubbles burst, hot smoke rose, and lava spread out. The entire PIM Technology building was as fragile as a plastic toy, constantly melting by the lava spewing out from within. The original site of the company turned into an active volcano in a short time. With a deafening roar, the human-shaped fire elemental crawled out from the ground. After swallowing more than half of the building, its burning lava body grew several times larger, reaching a height of 10 meters. It was like a demon from hell. Its existence was a disaster. The air within 100 meters of it rose rapidly after its appearance. The dozens of police cars that rushed to the road at the entrance stopped together. After the police got out of the cars, they looked at the fire elemental with pale faces, not daring to go any closer. In the end, it was the team leader who reacted first. He picked up the police communicator from his waist and dialed, "This is 101 Picton Street. Hurry up and contact the fire truck. No, contact SHELD and the unnatural firm. Tell them to send special personnel as reinforcements. This is not something we can deal with." The team leader looked away from the fire elemental. He waved his hand and issued an order to the rest of the police. Everyone, retreat a certain distance. Take the nearby residents 1 kilometer away and block the main traffic roads within 3 kilometers. Forbid vehicles and pedestrians from approaching this area. After all, he was a police officer who served as the leader of a police station in New York City. After experiencing the battle in New York not long ago, he knew that there were some things that the police could not solve. They could only wait for real personnel to solve them. In today's crazily collapsing world, without a symbol of peace and the existence of superheroes, Earth will probably evolve into a real hell. The team leader sighed. He took one last look at the fire elemental and turned to leave without hesitation. At this time, in the yard of PIM Technology, the grass withered rapidly under the scorching heat. Eddie and the other two stood side by side on the grass, looking up at the fire elemental that was still devouring and growing. Scott said anxiously with a dry mouth, "If we don't stop it here, it will devour New York City and spread the fire to other countries and continents until Earth is destroyed. The problem is, how do we stop it? Its weakness is in the innermost part of the lava." Peter smiled bitterly. He tried to stretch his hand forward and shoot the spider silk, but before it could touch the fire elemental, the spider silk burned to ashes in the air. Scott clenched his fists tightly and sighed. "If I had known, I wouldn't have used up all the water ball capsules. I should have been able to deal with it in its initial small form. But now, I really can't do anything." Eddie, who was still in the symbiotic state with toxin, didn't say anything. He kept staring at the fire elemental that was getting bigger and bigger. No one knew what he was thinking. In the mirror space, even Yutong raised her eyebrows and looked at the fire elemental that appeared in the real world through a layer of world membrane. She looked at Kale. "Boss, it's time for us to make a move, right? The 3 people outside can't deal with that thing. Wait a little longer." Kale's face was still calm. "Wait for what?" Yutong tilted her head and asked. "This time, it might be an opportunity." Kale replied calmly. In the mirror world, his eyes were fixed on Eddie and didn't move at all. "If it's you, you might be able to do it. You've thought of this too, Toxin. Let me see what the purpose of your mutation is." Kale thought to himself. There was a huge connection between him and Toxin. As for whether this connection would develop in a good or bad direction, he might be able to see some signs tonight. This was also the biggest reason why he allowed Toxin to stay on Earth. Scott and Peter were like ants in a hot pot. They were still racking their brains to think of a solution. At this moment, Eddie, who was standing in the middle of them, suddenly took a step forward. "Huh?" Scott and Peter looked over in surprise. "You guys step back a little, as for it. I'll stop it." Eddie stared straight at the fire elemental and said in a hoarse voice. Scott's eyes widened and quickly said, "You alone? How can you stop it? That's lava incarnation, nearly 1,000 degrees Celsius." "I know, of course I know this." Eddie's chest rose and fell. He looked at the fire elemental with his long and narrow white eyes and said inexplicably, "But I don't know why, I always have a feeling that it's just this. It's like I've seen fire and high temperature more powerful than this." This was not only Eddie's doubt, but also a reflection of Toxin's heart. At the same time, Eddie didn't wait for Scott and Peter to respond. He continued to move forward and directly walked towards the fire elemental. "Eddie!" Peter reached out to pull him back, but the fire elemental roared and a large amount of hot lava splashed out. Peter's face changed. He could only retreat with Scott and keep a safe distance of 30 meters from the fire elemental. At this time, Peter looked forward again, but Eddie's figure had already disappeared in the lava. "Crazy, that guy is crazy. Isn't he courting death?" Scott shook his head vigorously, not knowing what to say. In the fire elemental's huge body, the lava was like a sticky tide, flowing back and forth, but it was a hot lava tide of over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Eddie, who was in Toxin's symbiotic form, entered here. The muscles all over his body tightened, and the dark cuticle bulged. He resisted the high temperature with his strong body and showed no signs of being swallowed by the lava. It was born not afraid of fire and had an extremely high resistance to fire. This was something that Toxin knew when he was born, but he didn't know that he could be safe and sound in the lava of over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Sure enough, it's like this, Toxin's voice sounded in Eddie's mind. What's wrong, Toxin? Poison, what did you think of? Eddie was still confused. Toxin whispered, I always thought that it was normal for me not to be afraid of fire, but all the symbiotic creatures I met before were afraid of fire. Without exception, I was the only one who was special. What does this mean? Eddie asked. Two possibilities. First, I lost a part of my past memory and gained a high resistance to fire from a fire-type creature. Second, I might have been killed by someone's fire once. Toxin's tone was cold and complicated. He manipulated the merged body with Eddie, ignoring the hot lava, and entered the fire elemental's body to find the ether energy cluster as the energy core. He opened his left hand and pressed against the energy cluster. With a little force, he crushed the energy cluster. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.